And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, him.
All right, attention to roll call.
We are starting off the morning right. Here we go. Coffee and donuts right away. 516 Diecast. Good morning, Lieutenants. P.O. Fronte, President Duty. Outstanding. Thank you so much, brother. And here we go. More coffee and donuts. Tom Joyce, straight from the squad, $20. Good morning. All the squad is making a Defonte's run. Love it. We saw your comment come up before we started recording. Like, that was a great spot. Who's up for potatoes and egg hero? Tom, you can count me in for that. What do you want on it? Here's $20 out of my $1.7 million, Eric. That's right. Pensions worth an average of $1.7 million. John, good morning.
What's up?
I think let's just jump into it, man.
I want the roast beef. I'm skipping the eggs. I want the roast beef, huh?
With gravy?
With the gravy, a little Ojo sauce on it. Come on. We're going to get fat. If we're going to go to Defonte's, I'm getting fat.
Defonte's was good. I missed when I was a kid growing up, going to John's Deli, and I never forget John's Deli, get the roast beef sandwiches, or I think it was Fridays, you could get shrimp, and then sometimes they would have porn on the TV. I remember being a little kid like, what the hell's going on over here? So, was crime down in 2024? Are they telling the truth?
Crime, baby. The crime numbers. I believe them. I totally believe everything that's going on. So Adams and Tish had a press conference, end of year press conference. Again, I don't know who does their PR. It must be Adams because it's like the worst times ever to have the PR. I mean, shootings are through the roof to start off the year. Their numbers are all over the place. We ended the year watching crimes get reported in the news that were blatantly underreported, and like that to me, it tells me everything I need to know about Eric Adams and the NYPD. There's another corruption scandal that is looming under all of this, and that is going to be the downgrading of crime numbers, because we know what happened last year, right? Last year in 23, we ended off the year, crime was down 0.32%, and Eric Adams threw a party, right? Oh, we did a great thing. It was down 0.32% for the year. Not from 2019, not from when he got elected to office, 0.3. And then what happens? Obviously, NYPD conducts random sampling audits after the year. They go back to the command. They pull a random 20 misdemeanor complaint reports. And out of those 20 that they did, crime rose up. I think it was up over 4% the first month in. And I'm fully confident this year, crime, I believe it was down almost 3%. It was like 2.96% or something like that for the year for 24. I'm fully confident within a month or two, only doing that random sampling of those complaint reports, crime will be up. Crime will be positive, just like it's been every year of Eric Adams, administration.
I thought it was interesting at the press conference. Now, I don't know Jessica Tish personally, but before she became police commissioner, I didn't know if she used the word perception often or not, but she sure uses the word perception often now. She jumped on the same bandwagon. The decision and the determination and the indication whether Jessica Tish was the white horse coming in being the sole police commissioner for the NYPD or a patsy for Eric Adams, I think has been identified at this point. I think at this point, we know who she is, because just as Marlon Bethel coined it, shout out to him, brother, perception management. She's all over it. She talks about perception versus reality. They talk about crime. Crime is, if crime is down as significant as they claim it to be, then why do we have to fight this whole perception campaign? And I think it's quite interesting. She jumped on the same bandwagon as Michael Kemper, using the same notion that pretty much if you take out the cops, we would do pretty good when it comes to index crimes with assaults, because the only categories they claim are up are index crime when it comes to rape, and their justification for that was that the classifications for rape has changed. And then, of course, if we take out the police officers, we'll have less assaults. because that was the first case that they pointed at. Assaults are up because we have police officers getting assaulted. I mean, let's just take the police officers out. Somehow they take the blame. Sleepy Joe, shout out to you. Coffee and donuts. Here we go. $5. We need Comstat speak. Crime is trending in the right direction. Yeah, that's exactly what he said. Crime is trending. I love that. Main drivers assault to on police officers. We're down 200% week to date. Yeah, I mean, this has been the gaslighting that they've been giving out to the public. Well, rape is up because the classifications now, certain things that were not considered rape before are considered rape. And then, well, if we take out the police officers, we'll be fine when it comes to assault. But shout out to Sam Antar, who's been a major player in this this fight with crime numbers, utilizing NYPD's numbers. And what he identified is so significant and so important. If someone is shot upon, which is an assault, attempted assault, a felony assault, if their target is actually not hit, it doesn't count. So if you miss, you're good to go. John, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's another thing that's going to come up in those audits, you know. How do we know if somebody was hit, if this was a shooting incident? You have to check a box on a complaint report. How many times do you think that box was checked in writing, but yet when it was entered into the computer, just a clerical error, it just didn't go in? I'm going to tell you now, that's happening early and often in this New York City Police Department. But he's 100% correct what he says there. So before we get into the 2024 numbers, let's just look at the first week of 25. Let's look at 25, how the public sees it, and then look at what the NYPD reports. Let's do that. So this is Sam Antal, whitecollarfraud.com. He uses all of the NYPD's own numbers. This is not fabricated. To date, the NYPD nor any mainstream media have ever pushed back at Sam because they cannot. And what they said, they were out here, they were going to be debunking misinformation and disinformation and all this stuff. But to date, they watch everything Sam does and they ignore him like he doesn't exist, but they know all his numbers are accurate. New York Post, Daily News, Fox News, everybody has written articles and reported on the numbers that Sam Antar has put out. So to date, this man has not been debunked. These numbers are accurate. This is what it is. So let's just go first week of 25, right? This is what Sam reports. Week 1, 2025. Final tally on shootings in New York City. In the first week of 2025, 42 individuals were shot in New York City. This is a huge increase compared to 10 in 2024 and 15 in 2023. The numbers represent a 320% increase from last year and a 181.8% increase from 2023. Note, the NYPD initially reported 18 shooting victims during the first week of 24, but the latest report revised that number to 10. The NYPD uses a Monday through Sunday week to report crime. Periodic reminder, if a gunman misses their intended target, the NYPD does not count it as a shooting. This means that shooting incidents are only recorded when someone is actually hit. So 42 individuals were shot in the first week of 2025. It's a 320% increase from the year prior. However, if you think that criminals with illegal firearms on the streets of New York City are marksmen and go to the range and actually hit their targets 100% of the time, as opposed to about 15% of the time, you're out of your mind. So for 42 individuals that were shot, there were countless bullets that flew across New York City streets. There were countless incidents. There was way more than 42 incidents where somebody pulled out a firearm and unloaded. Just nobody was shot, so we don't know about it. So we already have the 320% increase. What do you think about what Sam's reporting here? Does this look like the city that is coming off of a year that we were down in crime?
This upper echelon has been known to have pissing matches with journalists or anyone that gives any opposition to this upper echelon. And yet, we don't hear any firing back when it comes from John Shell, Kaz Daughtry, Tariq Shepard. There's no pissing matches with Sam Antar because Sam Antar has the facts. There's no doubt about it. This gaslighting, this manipulation of these statistics are absolutely a lie to the public, just straight out lie. And you and I know exactly how they're manipulating this. But this idea of not including shots fired at a specific target, and if they're not hit, is not counted as a shooting, to me is completely fraudulent. There's no doubt about it. Sam Antar has had his finger on the pulse. Also, let's give a shout out to Reza Chattery, another person in this fight with actually utilizing NYPD's numbers to actually reflect just a complete lie out there. I think that they're lying to the public. There's no doubt about it. And they manipulate when they say that crime is down. They've had some small percentages that are down. As you said, it was 0.32% down, but yet still not down pre-pandemic levels and not down before Eric Adams got in office, right? He should be graded upon, is it actually down? And it's not down. Yeah, it's easy to manipulate. Again, I've said this before. If in the year 1999, I'm 200 pounds, and then I gain 200 pounds, and I'm now 400 pounds a year later, and then I lose 100 pounds, I'm still up another 100 pounds. And then manipulating the numbers by saying that it's down. It's just a complete lie. And again, this goes back to what I've been saying. Is Jessica Tisch that white horse coming in? Is she a sole police commissioner standing on her own 2 feet, or is she a patsy for Eric Adams? She's a patsy for Eric Adams because she's regurgitating this perception management. She's putting out the information about perception versus reality, and she's lying to the public just as she is with Eric Adams. So, this idea of Jessica Tisch getting onto this path of politics and being the police commissioner from the 43rd richest family in the entire country and having a strong name, I think she's tarnished that name. She's muddied up the waters, getting dirty with Eric Adams. This is just, a blight on her entire name. But you know what? She made her bed. VSS Venturas, shout out to you, $20. Here we go, coffee and donuts. These numbers are fudged to all hell, as with COVID, crime was down. And the fact Bug Eyes Hochul had to exclude New York City from New York State is laughable. Yeah, total cherry picking, brother. You're absolutely right. Oh, and shout out to the sheep cheering for congestion pricing, brainless lemmings. I spoke to cops yesterday, and I can't believe this. I had to go to work and they were already paying the $90 congestion pricing. The unions are doing nothing about it. And I was doing the math. On average, if you have 243 appearances for the year paying this congestion pricing, it's over $2,000 a year. That's a lot of money right now to make that increase substantially. Especially now that they're going to cut overtime, this is a big hit. It's going to be rough.
So let's just look at the Comstat numbers for this week, right? So for this week, we just told you, right? I just went over this. 328%, 42 shooting victims, right? 42. So, but what is the first week of NYPD report? Crime's down 19%. We're doing a great job. Murder's up 40%. Don't look at that. Rape's up 31%. But that's just because, we now include criminal sexual act, which used to be known as sodomy, as rape. It's like, okay, so are we justifying that somebody was not raped? I agree that I never looked at criminal sexual act or sodomy as not rape. So I don't care that it was a separate category. I always thought it was bullcrap that it was a separate category. So I don't care that the numbers show it's up. It's not like, oh, yeah, it's no big deal, It's no big deal because we just had to intertwine the numbers. It's like, no, you moron. The numbers are up because people are getting sexually assaulted and raped, forcibly raped. Does it matter what hole it goes in? Does it matter? You're justifying it by what hole it goes in? Oh, it's only up because, we count all the holes now instead of just one. It's like, oh, all right. Oh, yeah, I feel so much safer now. I just want to let my daughters and my wife and my sister and her kids walk around the city of New York. You know what it is? Don't worry about it. It's just because we're counting all the holes now. Everything's good, And so completely ridiculous. So, but the NYPD numbers report for the shootings, first week of 2025, shooting victims, 31 and 25. I'm sorry. Oh, I just missed this. Sorry, these numbers. Yeah, 31 and 25 with 10 victims, a 210% increase. So that's off from Sam's numbers. right? Shooting incidents, they count 16 as opposed to 9 the year prior, 77.8%. But again, that's not the times the bullets went out. So already you see when they break it down into time frames, they chop days off, they put it into this little time frame, and it does not give you the proper perspective of what happened in crime. All of this, to me, is complete conjecture at this point. I don't trust these numbers at all. The NYPD for 2024 should be full. The crime numbers, there should be a full audit done on these crime numbers, because I'm telling you right now, the discrepancies you will find that were on that report from what happened to what was actually on that report to what made it in the computer are going to make your mind spin. Because, and that's where you're going to see, oh, you know what? It wasn't just our perception. It was actually our reality that we are unsafe.
I agree with you. And I agree with you 100%, John. That's why I've been saying for the longest time, if I was working on this job right now, assigned to crime analysis, I would be very careful. If you're assigned to crime analysis right now, if this ship ever goes down when it comes to crime numbers, and you see the aspects of different corruption on different levels with this department right now, and we haven't been actually looking at the actual crime numbers as semantics and schematics, which it is. So if I was in crime analysis right now, I'd be very careful, because I'm pretty confident, based on what we've been seeing, this gaslighting, that crime analysis is definitely fudging some of these numbers. And I'm sure they're calling complainants and trying to reconfigure some of these complaint reports. So if you're a cop out there and you take a complaint, make sure you keep a copy for yourself if you think it might be something that could easily be manipulated. Because crime analysis is going to call you a complaint the next day and change that report. So if you're a crime analysis, I would think twice before doing that if the hammer ever comes down for this. Oh, that's hilarious. Joe Magel says, good morning to the lieutenants. I'm ready for another fire of a podcast and more of John's positivity. Absolutely. Positivity is the key, right? It's all sunshine and rainbows. And the bottom line is, it's very easy to manipulate New York City crime numbers, especially with NYPD Comstat. You can easily track it, right? We track it on a 28-day basis. We track it on a week basis. And it's even easier to track it on a week basis, because on the week basis, you're fighting the numbers from the year prior. So rhetorically speaking, if it's now this week in 2025, and we're fighting the same numbers for January 1st to January 7th of 2024, it's very easy. If we had the previous year, rhetorically speaking, let's say we had 7 index crimes, and we see there's another index crime that came out today, which is going to put it at 8. Well, it's very easy to hold that and say the complaint needs to be re-interviewed and not put it out to the following week. And then those crime numbers can match. So there's a lot of manipulation that can be done when it comes to these crime stats. And that's why Sam Antar, Razor Chowdhury have done such a fine job with utilizing NYPD's numbers. And also we see a lot of cherry picking when it comes to FBI reporting. Are they actually reporting properly? No, because the system in FBI changed. And it changed a couple of years ago. So it gives the NYPD an opportunity to actually report these numbers late. So it's a complete lie. And we've seen it, John. We've seen it last year when they had to go back and provide the correct numbers, and it completely skewed everything. It was completely changed.
Well, to be fair, they never went back and provided the numbers.
That's true too.
I believe it was a New York Post reporter. I forget who it was. He went back and found the numbers and reported it. So, and it was actually really, at the end of the day, it came from Sam Antar's numbers. Sam Antar was the one, and Razor Chowdhury were the one that went back and calculated it and said it. And that went out on social media. And then the report came out about a week or two later. So the NYPD never actually said, it never came out, and they didn't even address it. And then I think it was brought up like briefly, and Adams brushed it off in the press conference saying, oh, yeah, it's the usual. It happens. Things happen, things get upgraded. Complete lie. And so what and again, like what I said, the NYPD does is they just take this small random sampling, and based upon their small random sampling, they find numerous discrepancies. You're only grabbing 20 complaint reports out of thousands for each precinct, and you find numerous discrepancies on the 20. Imagine if you audited all of them. Imagine if you went through every audit instead of the small random sampling. Imagine how much the crime numbers would be up, and that's what that's what the public's not understanding is, they're having faith in an agency. And I'll be honest, I had faith in this agency for a very long time. I mean, the majority of my life, I had faith in this agency to report, to have integrity, integrity in reporting. And I no longer have that. I no longer have that because I was recently quoted in the Post in an article, and I think we shared that on here, where there was a doctor sitting in his office treating a patient, an elderly man treating a patient. Somebody just walked in and cold clocked the doctor, knocked him out cold for several minutes. He got 7 stitches across his face, had to go to the hospital, and they was documented as an assault 3. When every cop on here knows that is a felony assault, that is assault 2. Everyone here knows that, And then I think we reported another incident that happened in Staten Island with a young man in the movie theater where he gets beat up. He gets jumped, thrown across the floor, beat up on the floor, and they forcibly remove his cell phone. Eric, we know what that is. That is a robbery, clear as day. It's a felony robbery. Yet, that's not what the report was taken for. The report was taken for a misdemeanor petit larceny. I mean, and these are being reported in mainstream media. And the mainstream media is not even grabbing, the Post did. But the other article was written in the Staten Island Advance, and they didn't grab that. And I'm like, you're spelling out clear as day robbery. We were always told it's the complainant that is dictating what crime happened. It is not you. And the complainant is saying this would happen. This is what happened. That's it. Unless you could prove it later on by video evidence or whatever, then at that point, obviously, we don't want to mischarge people. But we're at face value, we're not taking complainants' words anymore. What city is this? What city is this? Oh, that's right. It's a criminal-centric city that no longer cares about victims, right? That's what we've been telling you for the last 3 years. So it's absolutely ridiculous. So when we look at that, I mean, I think that is the biggest problem here is we see a systemically corrupt NYPD stemming from the top, and yet we're supposed to believe that they're reporting numbers accurately when literally everything this mayor says is a lie. Everything that comes out of DCPI, everything that comes out of these chiefs' mouth is a lie.
I'm not excusing prior administrations because prior administrations were manipulating Comstat numbers also, but I think it was much more isolated to various precincts throughout the city. There's been commanders that have been held accountable for fudging numbers. I've seen it personally with the commander, recent commander a few years back in the 4-0 precinct. But with this administration, can anything be trusted? There's absolutely no integrity with this administration. And we see it. We see complete lies, these numbers that are utilized. It's not just isolated to one particular precinct. It's the entire police department that has been manipulated when it comes to crime stats. And they're just outright lying. The inception of Comstat was brilliant. The ideology behind it was to reduce crime and to be able to track the crime that's going on so you deploy your officers properly. That was ultimately the mission of Comstat, which made a lot of sense. But what's happened over the years in Comstat, especially this administration, is that you could gaslight the public and lie to the public and manipulate how you track the numbers and manipulate the crime numbers. And one thing we always knew in Comstat is where they would break down assaults and break it down, was there a knife involved? Is there an object involved? And now what they do is they're breaking it down to, is there actually a victim involved? And that's where I see the complete manipulation when it comes to these shootings, as far as if there's a victim or not. So that leaves a lot of questions to when they're responding, when the police officers respond to these calls, how are they actually documenting these shots fired? And definitely an indication, I think you and I were the only ones to call it out when it came to the encryption of radios. The encryption of the radios is a pathway to actually hide these crime numbers. And you and I have said since the beginning, we've had ways to talk on the radio that are encrypted, and it's always been transparent to the public, provide the information. In this encryption, you and I were not saying we're against the encryption, but we're saying that ultimately the reason behind the encryption for this administration was not for the safety of the officers, but exactly this, to manipulate the crime numbers. Jump Street 5683, shout out Coffee and Donuts $4.99. Here we go. Since Comstat was created, the job of every boss, sergeant, and up was to downgrade crimes and talk complainants into not making a report at all. That's absolutely true. And just to show you how effective, that's why I say I'm not excusing other administrations prior also. We all know, working in the police department, active, retired, if you worked in the Comstat era, it didn't matter if your commanding officer is away in Puerto Rico, if he's on vacation or home. Most commanding officers, they want an immediate response, a text or some type of phone call or some type of communication if there's an index crime in the precinct. To me, that's always been an indicator of fudging numbers and manipulating numbers. Why do you need to know in real time if there's an actual index crime if you're not going to respond? The reason why is because immediately they can start to figure out how to squash this number, how to coordinate with crime analysis in the precinct. So if anyone outside the NYPD crime analysis is a unit within each precinct that actually tracks the crime that's going on in the precinct. To me, that's just complete manipulation. John, I always had a problem with that, the fact that the commanders need to be notified immediately about an index crime. I think that is a pathway for corruption and misconduct. And this administration, I'm sure, took it to another level with these encryption of radios.
No, yeah, and I think that's why having integrity is a hard thing. I think it's a hard thing, and I think if you're unwilling to push back at those little things, you're going to be unwilling to push back at the big things. So yeah, I agree with you, but I think that I think that sergeants and lieutenants need to have a fucking pair of balls, and I think that they need to have some testicular fortitude. Excuse me, and and I think you need to be able to report things. A young sergeant, I vividly remember this. I'm up on 8th Avenue. This woman alleges that somebody stole, I don't remember. They either snatched her purse or whatever it was. But she speaks no English. So I have a translator, right? I have a translator come up to 8th Avenue. Translator comes up. He says, yeah, someone robbed her purse, whatever it was, or snatched her phone. I don't remember the exact detail of it. So I'm like, okay. I was like, whatever happened, I take it as a felony grand larceny, right? Felony grand larceny. It wasn't a purse snatch. It was a phone snatch, not whatever. Take it as felony grand larceny. I remember getting called in the SOL's office, getting told how I messed up. I'm like, wait, hold up. I said, this lady doesn't even speak English. I have a translator who's telling me her phone gets snatched out of her hand, and I take it as a felony grand larceny, which it is. And you're telling me I messed up? He's like, yeah. I was like, okay, then I messed up. And he's like, and the CO knows it. I was like, okay. And the next night, when I had another robbery, I did the same thing. And then when I go up, I think it was the midnight lieutenant. Now, it was a midnight lieutenant, and there was a robbery, and the robbery occurred. It was two druggies. One of them's in a house with his friend, and the friend beats him up and robs him of his money and his phone, and he leaves. So I go in, we're past the 4 to 12 now, and I go back to the desk lieutenant, and the desk lieutenant's like, this isn't a robbery. I'm like, this is clear as day a robbery. It's clear as day a robbery. He goes, yeah, but they're friends. I was like, oh, does it say in the penal law that if they're not friends, this isn't a robbery? I was like, what are you telling me? I was like, what does that fact matter that they're friends? He's like, but they're friends. I was like, okay. And the only reason he cared, it's because technically it was like the midnight that the crime happened. But I was the 4 to 12 sergeant, so I'm taking a felony on his platoon. And I thought it was the most ridiculous thing. And by the way, we had the guy. And I'm like, I never understood any of this, and I never will, because to me, it just shows complete incompetence if you have to fudge the numbers. Because one, we don't know the exact crimes that are being committed. So how could we stop them? We don't know the patterns that are emerging because we're not properly reporting the crime. So how could we stop them? And then how do we actually fight crime if we don't know what the crime numbers are accurately? So to me, it was never an issue. To me, I was always like, my goal in the police department was to be a commanding officer, and I was going to take every single crime. I was going to report with integrity and have my guys address it and show that if you actually do your job, crime will go down.
I gotta laugh because I used to say the same thing, right? And even sometimes, listen, sometimes it may take several days or even weeks to actually solve a pattern, right? So if you're affected by a pattern in your precinct, you're actually not reporting it properly, you're only actually going to allow that pattern to ferment and spread even further. And that's why I used to say to some of my commanders, why are you panicking for? They'd spend 3 days sleeping at the precinct and preparing for their testimonies at Comstat. I used to say testimonies. That's pretty much what it was. And in panic about some of the crime numbers that they had. I said, I don't understand. Isn't Comstat an opportunity for you to actually basically ask for more resources and say, hey, I have these issues going on. I have this particular robbery pattern in whatever zone in your precinct, or whatever sector, whatever they call it now. Sometimes they call it sector zones. But whatever, let's say, for instance, it's a particular sector or zone in your precinct, and you're having a robbery pattern there. And you've deployed the officers properly. You did your job. You deployed them according to the days, the times, the hours, what's happening there. You deployed the right teams to that location. You're doing intrusive police work, and you haven't stopped that robbery, and you're still getting numbers. If you deployed your officers properly and those numbers are still going up, well, to me, that's an opportunity to say, hey, well, I need more resources, or maybe I need a task force to look into this. I need the robbery squad to assist in this particular case. That, to me, the Comstat should be an opportunity to utilize more resources. If the numbers are going up, that's not an opportunity to try to manipulate and fudge the numbers. That's an opportunity to figure out, how do we actually drive this crime down? What resources do we need? And actually ask for help. But to me, Comstat really just was, for the most part, it was just a gotcha moment. Well, okay, but it should be, how does the people on the dais, the upper echelon, provide you with the resources so that you can be effective and not have to worry? You shouldn't be panicking. So, well, yeah, we had an increase. Here's what led to the increase. Here was our plan. This is how we deployed our officers. Okay, now we can come up. Was that the right plan? Let's come up with a better plan. Manipulate that plan. If the numbers are up, I don't understand why we're lying. Because if we are, then we're only giving the perception to the public, and we're lying to the public. And that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. And if you show that crime's up, you could actually have the story and a plan of what you're doing. So this is what's happening. We're having a burglary crew come in on the commercial, whatever it is, over on the midnight. This is what my guys are doing. This is what we've done so far. We've identified this crew. We're working on this. When we don't know any of that, everything's conjecture at that point. You're just like, nah, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just here. I'm just here keeping the crime numbers down. It's a complete joke. Jonathan Frederick says, investigate shots fired would be the meta metric to use. Confirmed ones, in parentheses, that is, it would be more reflective of what kind of gun crime is occurring. I agree with you. How about a robbery where there aren't shots fired? That person has a gun in their hand. How about those? That's not a gun incident. That's not a shooting incident. We don't know that there was a firearm involved in that incident. And the fact that we're using the amount of firearms we've confiscated as a victory, I'm sitting here like, wow, New York lost its way, bro. It is sick. Because I'll tell you, shout out to the police department for getting all those guns off the street. But what I'm about to say has nothing to do with you people. Has absolutely nothing to do with the New York City Police Department. New York City Police Department, rank and file, are doing their job. What that stat shows, by using that stat of, we took 20,000 guns off the street since I've been the mayor. So you're telling me over 100,000 people feel comfortable every day carrying an illegal firearm on New York City streets while you're the mayor? Why is that? Why are those numbers at historic highs? Why didn't people feel comfortable carrying firearms 10 years ago? Why did most of the firearm arrests stem from search warrants years ago? Why all of a sudden now, under your mayorship, under Bill de Blasio's mayorship, why do people now feel comfortable to carry illegal firearms in New York City? And you're touting this as a success when it's clearly the ultimate failure in public safety, in my opinion. When you go back to broken Windows era policing, people did not carry illegal firearms on New York City streets. They carried illegal firearms for two reasons. They were going to do a drug deal or they were going to shoot somebody. Other than that, they did not walk around the streets of New York City with firearms on them. Now you walk around the streets of New York City and you see all these kids with these fanny packs on them. Yeah, you know what? You know what the chances that they have a gun in that fanny pack is right here that's across that chest? About 90%. About 90%. Anyone that I see wearing that now, I'm like, yeah, that motherfucker. I'm like, yeah, that guy's got a gun in that fanny pack. 100%. And we're touting it as a success. And the reason we're doing that is to gaslight the public. It makes no sense to me. We're literally at this point, the upper echelon is working with the progressives, working against their own members. Just report it properly. Report what's going on properly. That's all I ever been saying. I've never said to take the blame for what's happening. But you deserve the blame when you're going along with this progressive agenda of, we want you to feel safe too. How could I feel safe when everyone's carrying guns and crime's up and you're telling me it's not up? Oh, and by the way, you're having a million different corruption scandals where your cops are shaking down people and you're selling sex for overtime.
What there should be this job likes a stat for everything, right? There's a force stat, there's Comstat, there's chalk stat for narco. There should be an overtime stat when it comes to with the sex scandals. See, how much overtime did you get for this particular category? You're gonna have to have a stat when it comes to that. Because somehow the precincts now, the cops that have their boots on the ground, that are working hard out there, are paying for what happened at one police plaza, paying for the misuse and abuse by the administration at the upper echelon. It's the cops in these precincts right now are paying for it. I thought it was quite interesting also how Jessica Tisch was actually gaslighting the public, because the reporter asked a great question. Now with this issue with the overtime, and if you're suppressing the overtime, how are you going to properly deploy police officers into the transit system right now with crime being up in the subways? And Jessica Tisch's response was that, well, we're going to send officers on straight time. How are you going to send officers on straight time when you don't even have the manpower? We had to utilize overtime before to actually have omnipresence in the subway. So she is trying to sell this whole thing to the public, that this inception of 1,600 police officers, potentially, if they could actually get it. And also they have a class coming out right now. 600 some odd police officers are going to hit those streets. How many of those 600 some odd police officers are going to hit the city? And once we spread them over 79 precincts and 12 transit districts and 9 PSAs, those numbers are not so significant, especially while you continue to have a mass exodus. Captain and Coke 7-0, shout out to you. I agree. Very simple. He says they carry guns because they know they won't get time. Listen, when I worked anti-crime as a sergeant and special operations throughout my entire career, I saw the change over time. When we were doing anti-crime, we would get guns, but it was a lot of work. You had to do a lot of surveillance. You had to probe. You had to do a lot of intrusive police work to get firearms. And John, I agree with you wholeheartedly. 100%. You're absolutely right. The difference before legislation changed in New York City, pre and post Bill de Blasio, and also with Eric Adams here 2.0, what we saw was that when violent perpetrators, persons of interest, subjects throughout New York City were actually carrying firearms, there was mission and significance, purpose, and importance. They carried that firearm because they were actually going to use it. What we see now is we see all types of people carrying firearms, not just actual violent perpetrators. We see everyone carrying firearms. I've seen some people that were not perpetrators at all. They're carrying firearms because the perception is that the city's just not safe. So the ability to actually get firearms, illegal firearms off the street, is honestly, it's so easy right now in comparison to before. And I'm not knocking the rank and file. They got their boots in the ground and they're addressing the crime that comes to them that they're faced with. But to actually tote and brag about getting 6,000 firearms, which is what Eric Adams said, I think is ridiculous. To me, that shows there's absolutely substantial amount of more illegal firearms that are on the streets of New York City. So it correlates. The arrests that you get correlate to the amount of crime. The product, he talks about the product and the performance. The product that they have, 6,000 guns, shows that there's more illegal firearms in the streets. And I'm surprised, John, with all these signs out there that say gun-free zones, how do people actually have guns? I don't understand it. Mikey G, metal detector, Long Island, shout out to you. Broken windows and stop, question, frisk are no longer out there. For the most part, I would say the overwhelming majority are not doing intrusive police work. Some are doing stop, question, frisk. We see it. The overwhelming majority of type of intrusive police work they're doing is car stops that lead to these crazy vehicle pursuits. But the actual stop, question, frisk of people walking in the street, interactions, I think, is much more limited than what we've seen before. And I can't blame them, because the potential ramifications of civil liability and especially the arm of Civilian Complaint Review Board. Because once you start to get on the radar of Civilian Complaint Review Board, there goes your 58 and there goes your career. Shout out to Sleepy Joe, $10.16, 10.16. Here we go. Coffee and donuts to go with the fanny packs. We have early model Nissan Maxima Altimas with excessive tints and out-of-state tags, temp tags. Yes, I mean, there's definitely some significant amount of stolen cars, ghost cars in New York City. Crime's all over the place. Perception versus reality, John. Do you think perception is reality? Why do you think that they keep utilizing this term after we've already smacked them when it comes to perception? Why do you think they continue on this perception campaign? Do you think that they believe that low information people buy it? Or do you believe it's their only chance of manipulating these numbers?
I mean, who said it? Who was it? Who was Hitler's propagandist? Whatever his name was. He said it best: repeat a lie over and over again, and it becomes a fact. And that's what's happening. I hear people on Fox News saying it. I hear Rosanna Scotto saying, "Oh, I know you want people to feel safe too. I know, I get it. You want people to feel safe too. No, I get it. You want it to feel right." And I'm like, are you people kidding me? You want to feel safe? No, the numbers aren't down. No, the numbers aren't down at all. You know, somebody on here said, Comstat, this is the reason for Comstat to downgrade crime. So I just want to be real clear about my position on Comstat. I think Comstat is a great tool. I think it's a great tool for adults. It's a great tool for people with integrity. I think that Comstat is probably an invention that should have happened 50 years earlier, prior to Jack Mabel. As a police department, how could you effectively fight crime when you don't understand crime? So I think, and how do you hold your employees accountable and have metrics for success for your employees if you don't know the data? So Comstat is a much needed tool. It's a much needed tool. Now, has Comstat been misused by people that have been in charge of Comstat as a way to bully lower downs, captains, CEOs of commands? Yeah, absolutely. It's been we've all seen that. But a lot of that stems from the lack of courage in leadership in both the people that lead in Comstat and the people that are in charge of commands. There's a lack of courage. There's a lack of integrity there. And that's the problem with Comstat. Comstat is a great tool and should go absolutely nowhere. That should be a mainstay in everything that any type of department does. This should be a mainstay in any type of business you run. You should know every piece of data of that business. You should be able to know what you're going to do, what your plan is, what your metrics for success, how that plan is. How do you hold your employees accountable? How do we hold precinct commanders and cops accountable to actually going out there and provide public safety if we can't see what's happening? If we couldn't see what was happening right now, it would be, no, everything's fine. The trains are safe. No, everything's good. Everything is good. We're doing a great job. Crime's down. Eric Adams is the best mayor ever, just like Corey Pagese was one of the best CEOs ever, according to Eric Adams. So that's like, to me, I have zero issue with Comstat. I think it's a great tool. I think it's been misused. And I think if you had adult leadership and people with moral courage and people with a spine, it would actually, it's the only way to actually bring down crime is to go over these numbers, understand them, understand what crimes you're taking, hone in on investigations, see what you're doing, steering those investigations in the right direction. I mean, anyone would agree with that. Anyone that owns a business or runs a business or wants to know what's going on is going to be a supporter of Comstat. I'm a huge supporter of Comstat.
I think Rob Nappy, really slams it home with this comment here. Shout out to you, Rob Nappy. Absolutely. He says, I went to Comstat from the start, 1994. It made sense to analyze crime and deploy people correctly. It showed COs who never left their office from those that were sharp folks. I agree. Absolutely. You can definitely, there's no hiding it, right? And that's why I think Comstat is necessary to hold the commanders accountable, because it's easily exposed if the commander has actually delved into what's going on in the precinct. Do they actually know what's going on in that precinct? Not just data driven. It's almost to me like the movie Moneyball. Remember with Brad Pitt, and when they start to analyze, and it was completely data driven to win a championship in Major League Baseball. And for a period of time, it started to work, but eventually it tailed off, and you can't just be completely data driven. So I think Comstat's amazing. I actually, I agree with you, John. I've been to Comstat the majority of my career, constantly going, especially working in the South Bronx. We were there every 4 to 6 weeks. And I think Comstat is very impressive. I think it's necessary, just as I read earlier. Basically, the mission of Comstat is to analyze the data so you can deploy your officers and track the crime to deploy properly. And it actually, I think, opens that window to determine if we're actually utilizing the right plan, right? Based on, well, if the data is not following your plan and the crime is going up, then we need to change course or we need to get more resources. And I think that's unfortunate. That's where we see the lack of leadership with the NYPD. We see egotistical maniacs at this dais who are not trying to provide resources, but it's more of a gotcha moment. And this shouldn't be a gotcha moment. It should be, well, we need to work together and be a team. How can this dais, if I'm Chief LaPetri on the dais here with crime control strategies, based on the data that you have, the plan that you have, it's not working. Let's try another plan. What resources can we use? Because we want what's best for public safety. This shouldn't necessarily just be a gotcha moment. So you can't just be completely data-driven. So the commanders also have to know their people. Not only are you deploying personnel, but that's also, I think, what's effective about being a good commander and being a good leader is you have to know your people, you have to know your personnel, and you have to know the leadership tactics that work so that you could actually work hand in hand with this data. So the data is important. I agree. I think Comstat is extremely effective, but it's been utilized improperly. And it's meant to try to drive numbers down just for promotions and self-serving. That's what happens. These commanders, they want to just crush these numbers. They don't really care about the public. They don't care about what's going on with the command fudging numbers. They just want to crush these numbers, give an impressive stats to the dais of the NYPD so that they can get promoted. And this is a problem. This is a major problem. It's self-serving.
Yeah. So let's look at what Sam had to say about 2024 crime numbers, right? Like I said, crime for 2024, according to the data, shows it's down nearly 3%. We'll bring you the press conference with Tish and Adams. But this is what Sam had to say before we bring that up. Memo to New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Stop gaslighting New Yorkers on crime. You omitted the following crucial facts. Note 2024 numbers exclude 1230 and 1231, while 2023 and prior years are full year numbers. Violent crime is up at least 2.4% over 2023. It's up 23.6% since you took office in 22. And it's up over 32%, 32.2% over 2019, the last full year before the pandemic and the implementation of discovery reform. So violent crime under Eric Adams is up 23.6% since he stepped into office. Since prior to the pandemic, it's up 32.2%. That's not perception. That's reality. Okay? Now his next stat. While at best, index crimes, violent crime, and property crimes are down 3.1% this year, they're at least up 19.6% since you took office and up 28.5% since 2019. That's not perception. That's reality. Then he says, while you tout a decrease in murders, this improvement masks a disturbing shift. The 16 case reduction in murders in 2024 coincides with at least 1,318 additional felony assaults, a category that includes attempted murders. This statistical slate of hand ignores a crucial factor. The difference between a murder and an attempted murder often comes down to the skills of a trauma surgeon rather than a criminal. So Sam brings up our improvements in the medical industry, right? So what he's telling you here, there were 1,318 more felony assaults this year than the year prior. That is a huge increase in number. And in there, Any one of those felony assaults could have been a murder. Then he goes on further. A shooting only counts when a bullet strikes flesh. This means 1, missed shots don't count. 2, spray and pray incidents with no casualties are excluded. 3, drive-by shootings without injuries aren't recorded. 4, shots fired into occupied buildings or vehicles aren't counted unless someone is hit. 5, if the shooter has bad aim and misses the intended victim, it is not counted as a shooting. Sam goes on to talk about the FBI numbers. The FBI numbers are inaccurate. Take, for example, 2023 violent crime numbers for New York City. The FBI claims that violent crime dropped 8.9% in New York City, while the NYPD claims violent crime increased 2.4%, resulting in an undercount of over 6,900 violent felonies. The FBI numbers indicate a 9% increase in property crime, while the NYPD's numbers reflected a 1.1% decrease. All my data is sourced from official New York City, New York State, and FBI crime statistics. Another thing about Sam, what we have to know is Sam is a convicted felon who defrauded the federal government for a long time. And after he was caught, you could read about him in Retail Gangster, the book. He worked with the FBI and trained FBI investigators on how to find fraud. Sam started looking at these numbers because he lives in Manhattan and he saw something was not right with his own eyes as to what was being reported. And immediately upon looking at NYPD numbers, guess what he saw? Glaring fraud being committed by elected officials in the upper echelon of the NYPD in the way they are misreporting crime data. And that is what Sam has been working on. He does this for free. He makes no money off of this. And he does this as a way to give back to humanity.
We had Sam Antar on the show, and he delves into this, and he does a fantastic job with numbers. And I remember him telling us how easy it is to actually manipulate numbers for a company organization. So especially for him to delve into the NYPD, these numbers are factual. He's utilizing the actual numbers from the NYPD statistics itself. These aren't numbers made up. These aren't numbers drawn upon on his own. He's utilizing the numbers and actually giving the real numbers. So it was his perception of what's going on in New York City that led Sam to actually delve into this. And Sam completely uncovered what's going on here. And this is a breakdown. And that's why you don't hear any opposition to Sam Antar from Eric Adams or the upper echelon of the police department. And they're very comfortable firing away when people are against the police department or given any rhetoric, or as John Shell likes to say, misinformation, yet we don't hear anything. Ron Layson, shout out to you. That's 100% true, John. And when you go up at Comstat, explain that you ID'd a pattern trend and put a coordinated plan in place and assess and tweak as needed, people in the room know you're in the game. Absolutely, Ron. Absolutely. I mean, I was at Comstat constantly. I was there with you also. You can tell the difference immediately. And it's not about speaking ability or public speaking. Some are better than others. Some commanders, they have more of an eloquent tongue. Some have more of the silver tongue. But you can tell who's actually in the game and actually knows what's going on in their command to someone that just has been riding the wave and hoping to get out of there and just get promoted. There's no doubt about it. But unfortunately, what I did see at Comstat, and Ron Layson may agree or may not, and he may not want to say here retirement, I understand. But what I did see at Comstat is I saw a clear indication of nepotism also, not just with this administration, but I saw that certain commanders were challenged much more than others. And there was a lot of discriminatory factors on why. And I made my own observations on that. I saw some commanders, they were given these ground balls, questions that a fifth grader could answer. And even sometimes I saw some of these commanders just completely funk on those answers also, and they were given passes because they had the right connections. And then there were commanders who were out there busting their hump. Like I had a few in PSA 7. They were doing a fantastic job, and they knew what was going on in the command. And they were asked the most ridiculous questions to have that gotcha moment. And you know what was the common denominator, John? You know the commanders that were pressed the most? They were male whites. That was the bottom line.
I'm shocked. I am shocked. The guys that get promoted the least and it takes the longest amount, those guys?
Exactly. I seen those commanders pressed and challenged like you wouldn't believe. And yet these guys were doing a great job. And I'm not saying that some of the other commanders weren't doing a good job that weren't white, but they were not pressed as much as the white commanders. And some of those commanders that weren't white, that were DEI promotions, they had no idea what was going on in their command. For some of them, I don't even think they knew where to find the building. As particularly, I thought that sometimes to me it appeared transit was like a dumping ground, because some of the commanders they had in transit, I don't even think they knew where the train was. They had no idea what was going on. They asked, very simple about picks and dips, right? Who their pickpocket people were, their dips. I remember one time they had one of these commanders, they had this big pattern going on. They had no idea that the perpetrator was already apprehended. And this was like a gotcha moment they put up on the screen and showing that the perpetrator was apprehended. But then, of course, this commander was given a pass. She was, she threw the SOL under the bus. I'm not giving her name, but she threw the SOL under the bus. The SOL got bounced, and she eventually got promoted. But this is what happened to Comstat. What's that?
That's leadership.
Great leadership. Great leadership.
Under the bus, take no responsibility, no nothing. Incompetence, you're rewarded. Yeah, here you go. Here you go.
Cal Fire Rescue, shout out to you, brother. Coffee and donuts. Here we go. $4.99. Good morning, Unfiltered crew. When in the tarnished Big Apple, where can one buy Colombian drug lord get threads? Now, you know what to ask about that. Thank you for speaking the truth. Well, thank you so much, brother. Coffee and donuts. I mean, John, I know you went to Comstat too, but I went there quite often, and I've seen it. Particularly Chief Valdez, right? He's now a chief, right? Is he still on the job? This guy couldn't put two words together.
I don't think he's in the corruption scandal yet.
Oh, well, we'll see about that. He couldn't put two words together. And I hate to knock him, but the guy couldn't put two words together. I had no idea what was going on in the precinct. It was a complete disaster. And he had one of the busiest precincts in the entire city, the 4-year-old precinct. The largest conglomerate of housing in the precinct. Thank God for him. It's the largest concentration of housing in the entire city. And it was the housing CEOs that were able to pick up the mess that he couldn't figure out. I mean, honestly, couldn't put two words together. And yet he made it to chief. So that's the NYPD. That's your NYPD leadership.
I unfortunately agree with you. Tom Joyce says that Comstat has such a good methodology that he used it to raise his kids. And then he went on and said that the problem in Comstat's a great tool, but a lot of times the metrics get in front of the mission. And I think that's 100% accurate. What we see is we need that decrease to show that you're working and you're doing your job, when that might not be accurate. And that increase or that decrease, it's just crime trends, right? Crime's a wave. It's coming up. It's coming down. It's what are we doing to combat that is should be the real metric, not what necessarily the results are. If you didn't get a decrease for that month or that 28-day period or even that year, that doesn't mean you weren't effective at your job. And I think that's what, where it misses the mark. So I agree with you. I think that's where Comstat fails, is that the metric always gets put in front of the mission. And that's due to lack of spine, in my opinion, and lack of intelligence and lack of the ability to actually look and present things properly as to what's going on. And I think that's a major problem in the usage of Comstat. But Comstat, again, I think is a great thing. We're going to talk about the Colombian drug lord in a little bit. Let's bring up to the stage because, there's a racial component apparently to the corruption scandal. It's racial, but it's also racial what Eric just said too. Like he's a racist, and that's why we're an openly racist platform, is because unlike anybody else on that talks about the NYPD, we actually tell the truth. We actually tell the truth. For 3 years, everyone's been calling and asking, what's going on in the NYPD? Why does the NYPD feel like to me that they're completely incompetent and they're completely different agency? And I'm like, because we took the dumbest people, the most incompetent, dumbest people, and we put them in charge of the NYPD. And people automatically take pause at that statement. They're like, why? And instantly they want to go on to the fact of the color of the people's skin that have been put in charge. There are plenty of white people on the job that are morons and incompetent and that have been raised up and brought up in this administration because of their compliance. It has nothing to do with the color of their skin. It has everything to do with their record, with their character, with their personality, with their work ethic. I'm just stating what I'm seeing. And Eric just clearly showed you that, right? Oh, here's a woman. She goes up. She's in charge of a transit command. She knows nothing about her transit command. Absolutely nothing. She throws all of her people under the bus and does the exact opposite of what a leader would do. A leader would own everything. That's me. I did that. I instructed them. This is on me. These are my people. This is what I've done. This is how I've done it. So obviously someone that should not be promoted, and she gets almost immediately promoted after going to that Comstat, and probably didn't even get beat up in that Comstat. When you see competent people that know their crime take full responsibility for everything, it takes them forever to get promoted, and they get slaughtered at Comstat like they're children when it's non-deserving. And that's why I'm saying, and Eric's been saying, we've been saying on this platform, that you put the dumbest, most incompetent people that exhibited the least integrity in charge of the New York City Police Department. And now you're shocked that there's all these corruption scandals and the department's a mess. I'm not surprised. Eric's not surprised. It's hysterical, dude. But but we're openly racist. Let's just bring race into everything, because that is the only thing you have to argue about, because that's the only deflection from the truth. You guys are racist. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. It's still the truth. You're still the dumbest, most incompetent people that's ever ran this job.
Maybe Marjorie was discriminatory, because I don't see any. It appears all the women involved in the scandal so far are black females. So I guess he wasn't picking white females to come to his harem.
Yeah, exactly.
But I thought it was ironic, because of course I said to Corey Pegues, I don't understand this whole racial undertone that you're trying to implement here. Lieutenant Epps made allegations of a sex scandal. She didn't make any allegations of discrimination. So where are we going with this thing? But again, we have to interject the racial undertone anytime that there's actually not a defense and there's not actually evidence-based compensation. Well, we interject race. And that's what we see with this administration. So, Corey, are you with this administration? Because, it's starting to look like you are. So, John, shout out to Patrick Donahue. First day of college, I had a class of established 220 intro to statistics. Professor said statistics can be used to win either side of the argument. Only difference is how people see the statistic. Say that 10 times. You're absolutely right. Statistics can be manipulated and utilized. I mean, we even see it in sports. You could manipulate statistics. So yeah, it could be complete schematics and semantics. So let's get right into this, John. I think this is Gaslighting 101 from the Eric Adams, Jessica Tisch combo here.
Sure. But before I do, just one comment of Ron. He says, Eric, that is 100% true about the city getting ground balls, even though about some that get ground balls, even though they were getting crushed in crime, and others getting crushed when they were doing pretty well. I'm not going to say it was dictated by race. We're not saying that either. We're saying I think a lot of that has to do with gender as well. I do. I think a lot of that has to do with gender. I think female commanding officers are treated much differently. I've observed many Comstats, and I see them being treated much differently by the patriarchy up at the dais, and so that I think there is a play, whatever it is. We're not saying that it's race or it's not race. The numbers, as far as promotions though, show that there is a racial component too, right? The numbers show that that is actually a racial component. Why does it take a male white officer 6 times longer to get promoted from the rank of captain for deputy inspector than the rest of the job? Why does it take a male Asian to get 7 times longer than it does everyone else on the job? I mean, the numbers are the numbers. That's what we've been told, right? We were told when they threw out that FD&Y exam that based upon the numbers, sheer number alone, that FD&Y exam was racist, right? So then how is that not racist? If we're going to go by that ruling of that court judge in New York, to me, that shows clear as day racism in the New York City Police Department when it comes to the promotion of captain to deputy inspector.
Well, I used to say it all the time jokingly because it's the reality. The reality, right? We're not racist at all on this platform, but we're identifying the truth. The reality is that sometimes I would say if you change your gender and you change your identity, you have a far better chance of getting promoted. We see the numbers. If you change your, if you're not white and you change it to black, if you change yourself from male to female, you change yourself from straight to gay, you change your color, you change your creed, it does change your trajectory of potential promotion. No doubt about it. Nepotism is huge on that. Huge criteria also for getting promoted. But DEI in the last couple of years was a major factor. There's no doubt about it. And John and I did in the early days of this podcast, we did an episode where we broke down the numbers that we actually reported by the New York Post of promotions. And you can see a female black was getting promoted at a much higher rate than a male white. And there's no doubt about it that race, gender, and sexual identity play a major role in your promotions. And I'd say, and if I had to do it all over again, I would say, obviously I can't change my gender. Maybe I would, but I would just say I'm gay, and I would change my sexual identity, and I would probably have a better chance of getting promoted. That would get me in the walls of nepotism. So it's unfortunate, but color, creed, sexual identity plays a major role when it comes to promotions in the police department, and we can't hide from that. It's not right. I don't think we should be doing that at all. I don't care if you're straight, gay, who you love, what you do. I care how effective are you in your position. Who cares what you look like or what you sound like, and who you love. When you're at work, how do you perform? Are you capable and suitable to do the job? And we know we have the proof. We did an episode here where Tanya Meisenholder, and an English police officer noted that the male whites in the police department are referred to as knuckle draggers. She talked about getting 30 for 30 when it comes to females. She talked about sexual identity as being an important component to policing for identity. So we have the facts. So it's not actually being racist. These are not indications that we've made on emotion. This is by fact. This is facts, what we have from the DEI movement in the NYPD by the Office of Equal Employment Opportunity under Tanya Meisenholder. We have the facts based on the numbers of who's actually getting promoted. By the average amount it takes for an Asian to get promoted is 7 years in comparison to, I think, a female black job was about a year. I mean, these are huge, huge numbers, and you can't shy away from it. This is fact. It's not conjecture.
Yeah, Pat Donahue says, when I was on the DEA board, which is the Detective Endowment Association board, I was tasked with asking personnel for a breakdown of first and second grade by ethnicity and gender. Department refused to voluntarily provide those numbers. Exactly, because they know that if you would have got a hold of those numbers, there's a lawsuit involved. And you could have just went off of that FD&Y exam and it would have held up. So that's why they held those numbers up, because this department is not transparent at all, and they contradict themselves in the same press conference over and over again. All right, let's watch a little bit of this. I don't think we should watch the whole thing. It's 40 minutes. Let's just watch a little bit of this press conference, and we'll switch topics. Here we go.
We got Nicole Johnson here. This is a big day.
Good afternoon, everyone. There are plenty of details to discuss in the 2024 crime data, so we'll get right into it. Overall, index crime in 2024 was down under Mayor Adams' leadership, with reductions in 5 of the 7 major crime categories, including murder, robbery, burglary, grand larceny, and auto theft. This translates to 3,662 fewer incidents of major crime last year than the year before. And these are not just numbers. We're talking about thousands of people who were not injured, abused, attacked, or targeted by criminals. And notably, homicides, which came in at 377 victims last year, have declined for 3 years in a row and are now at a 5-year low. Our work against gun violence reduced both shooting incidents and shooting victims for the 3rd straight year. The result was the 4th lowest year for shooting incidents citywide in the Comstat era, stretching all the way back to 1993. And in 2024, shootings in the geographical borough of Brooklyn were the lowest they've ever been since Comstat began tracking them. Certainly, some of these gains can be attributed to the work of the women and men of the NYPD who have taken an unprecedented number of guns off our streets since Mayor Adams came into office in January 2022, nearly 20,000 of them. That's approximately 3,000 more guns off our streets than the 3 previous years. Major crime in public housing was down 4.5% for the year, and major crime in our transit system was down for the second straight year in 2024, decreasing 5.4% compared to 2023. We are now about 13% below pre-pandemic index crime levels in our transit system. I want to be very clear. The subways will always be a bellwether for the perception of public safety in New York City. Declining crime numbers are significant, but we still must do more because people don't feel safe in our subways. Effective this week, I've directed that we move more than 200 officers onto the trains to do specialty train patrols. And I have further directed that we deploy more officers onto subway platforms in the 50 highest crime stations in the city. It's all part of a strategy to refocus our subway efforts to the places where the crime is occurring. We know that 78% of transit crime occurs on trains and on platforms. And that is quite obviously where our officers need to be. This is just the beginning. This month, we will roll out substantial additional improvements to our transit deployments to be even more responsive to the terrifying acts of random violence we have seen recently. I will have more to say about that soon. Despite the gains made against crime in 2024, there were 2 index categories up last year: rape and felony assault. For rape in particular, there are 2 things to note. The first is that starting on September 1st of 2024, the law changed to rightfully redefine and broaden what constitutes rape in New York State. Also notably in 2024, nearly half of our reported rapes were domestic violence related, and this share is up from recent years when it hovered at about 35%. We know that rape has historically been underreported, and we encourage all victims to come forward. The other major crime that increased in 2024 is felony assault, which was driven by assaults on our officers, domestic violence, and stranger attacks. Now I'm going to address the current trajectory for index crime. And the headline here is that we are trending quite well. Overall, index crime in the last 3 months of 2024 was down 8%, led by reductions of 12.1% in grand larceny, 13.1% in auto theft, and 13.4% in robbery. This past December, major crime declined in every patrol borough and was down 15.5% overall. And in the first week of January, major crime is down 20% citywide. Crime reduction in 2024 was also paired with significant increases in engagement by our officers, with major felony arrests reaching a 26-year high. I want to be very clear. The crime reductions we saw last year were achieved against all odds and are entirely attributable to the hard work and the grit of New York's finest. The deck has been completely stacked against our cops, and there is one glaring issue: surging recidivism. If you compare 2024 to 2018, we see a 61.3% increase in people arrested for burglary 3 or more times in the same year. That increase is 83.3% for robbery. And when we look at felony assault, an index crime that was up in 2024, that increase is a staggering 146.5%. That is what we're up against, and we know why. The key driving factor is the revolving door of our criminal justice system, created in large part by legislative changes that took effect in 2020. Case in point, Last month, a career criminal robbed a Queens deli at gunpoint before shooting and injuring a responding NYPD officer and a 26-year-old innocent bystander. The shooter had 17 prior arrests, 17 of which happened while he was out on lifetime.
All right, that's enough of that. What do you think about what all this? That I don't think we need to go any further. I think she summarized this whole thing. It's the problem with assaults is cops are getting assaulted. The problem that rapes are up is only because we now classify all holes instead of one. And recidivism is the major problem here. But overall we did a great job, and crime's trending particularly well. That's the headline. What do you think about all this?
I love it. Crime is trending particularly well, and let's give the trajectory, right? I mean, this is almost like a business plan. This is almost like they went to a bank and they're giving a business plan so they could actually start a business. Here's the trajectory. Here's our projection. They're projecting. How do you know what the numbers are going to be, right? First of all, you can't even deploy officers properly because you just cut down on overtime. You can't guarantee you're going to get 1,600 new police officers because we can't even get the police officers. So these are promises that you can't keep. But to me, honestly, I felt like a little kid that was in his bed and she's reading a bedtime story. It's like the cat in the hat. Crime. And guess what? Next was robbery. We had robberies it's going in the right direction. And let me be clear. She says, let me be clear one more time when I hang myself over here. Yeah. This sounds like a bedtime story. This doesn't. She's a good reader. I mean, is she actually the commissioner? She's just reading from, it sounds like she's reading a bedtime story. She talks about trajectory. I mean, this is just complete hogwash. And we see right through it. So you know what? If she ever had a good name, she destroyed her good name. And to me, this is another Eric Adams campaign. Under the great Eric Adams, really? Eric Adams is under indictment right now.
Yeah, no. I thought this was her worst press conference by far. I agree with you 100%. This is all just propaganda. She's talking to us like we're peasant children, like the elitists in New York City often do. Go down and take the train while we have the majority of our cops up top ensuring that you're licensed and registered and you have no plate covers, so you're paying your congestion pricing. Because, by the way, I don't want to sit in traffic while I'm driving around New York City, so you people all need to go in the train, okay? Because driving's for rich people, folks. In case you didn't understand that, that's basically what's going on. And who the hell said it here? Chris Arnold. He said deploying officers into subways is the approval of congestion pricing, right? Make sure you get down in the subway, right? We want you in the train, and that's exactly what's going on. This is all tied around that. This is a very elitist. This was a very elitist stance she took. Again, like I said, reported crime, which is misreported, is down for 2024, but it will not hold once these random audits are done. Crime will have gone up again for the third straight year in Eric Adams' administration. So those numbers won't hold. And crime is absolutely not trending in the right direction. When we had 42 people shot in the first week of 2024, to sit here and tell New Yorkers, yeah, everything's great. We're doing great down in the subway. We're doing great up top. We just want you to feel safe. It really just drives home that they're completely out of touch with actually what's happening and what the people know. They're just trying to continue to run this perception campaign. This is all. It's not. It's just your perception. It's like, well, why do I have this perception? Why am I scared to go on the train? Oh, it's not because we just saw a woman get burned alive on the train. It's not because we saw 10 people get shot outside of a nightclub. It's not because people are getting robbed every day. It's not because of anything. It's just we just have this weird feeling because of these podcasts and social media. It's like, nah, dude. We kind of have I know Elon Musk wants to move towards the positivity route, but there's not really a positive way to report about a woman getting burned alive on the subway, or 10 people getting shot, or 42 people getting shot in the first week. We'll try to do it with sunshine and rainbows and smile, but it really is a bleak picture. And I think it was completely disingenuous on our part. And I agree with you 100%. I think she really tarnished her name in the last 2 weeks. And every move that she made was just perception. It was all that, everything that's coming out of there is perception trying to fight your reality.
I feel like this is almost like, hey, do you want, you talk about perception reality. It's like, do you want the bedtime story or the real story? She gave us the bedtime story. I mean, honestly, it was like, we're little kids, and she just gave you a bedtime story to put you to bed. Don't worry, I'm going to give you a fictional tale. That's what this was. Jessica Tisch, she's a patsy for Eric Adams. There's no doubt about it. Again, she's from the 43rd richest family in the entire country. She's a billionaire heiress. How could she relate? Does she even know what the subway looks like? I mean, how could she relate to the actual New York City person? Honestly, this is the most ridiculous thing. And again, it sounded like also to me, if you listen to it, it sounded like a business plan. They're given trajectory and projections. I don't know how you can give trajectory and projections. I know she claims to be data driven, but this is where she's missing the mark. Okay, you can make the argument whether you should be a police officer or not, but she's in leadership, she's in management right now. This is not a Fortune 500 business. This is the police department. And to talk about trajectory and promote and projections, we don't know what's going to trend. It was very convenient. She did a good job, and she knows exactly what she's doing. Very convenient to say where crime is trending in the wrong direction on things you can't control. Pretty much, right? And what do? Domestic violence can't necessarily control it because it's something that happens indoors, right? We can do our visits to the best of our ability and try to subsidize and supplement and try to curb it as much as possible. But domestic violence is a very tough thing to combat. These are things that happen indoors, and it takes a lot of other methods to actually help domestic violence, other social programs and counseling, not necessarily the police. And then, of course, they talk about rape and different laws that have changed. And John, you make the claim, it sounds funny, but it's true, of which hole. I agree with you. Any form of sexual abuse to me should be rape, especially, when you're inserting something in someone's body without their permission. And then what do they go to? And they blame the legislation for it, right? It's assaults on cops. The reason why index crimes are rising when it comes to assaults, they're not assaulting you on the street. They're assaulting cops, so don't worry about it. These are three things that we can't control. Thank you for the bedtime story. I mean, she might as well have read Cat in the Hat.
Yeah. So Juju says, no, you are out of touch, John, talking about crime in New York City from thousands of miles away. You're right. I'm pointing out to the facts of crime in New York City while you're in New York City lying about it and working for the police department, getting paid a salary. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for recognizing that we could see these from 1,000 miles. Eric's in LA right now, and he could see it, and he's on the other side of the country, and he could see the facts of crime while you're getting paid by the citizens in New York to provide public safety. But instead, you're going to sit on this podcast, get paid, probably get overtime. More than likely, you've used the federal code yourself. Maybe it was the World Trade Center code for federal overtime. Is that the one, Juju? Yeah, I'd be real careful, dude.
While monitoring this podcast, they use the federal code.
Yeah, while monitoring the podcast. Yeah, well, hey, listen, you never know. We could, I know we were labeled as extremists as well, too, besides just being racist. Telling the truth is an extreme act in the modern day NYPD, obviously.
I must be a white Jewish supremacist.
It's sick. So, all right, let's move forward. So I think at the end of the day, let's wrap up crime 2024. What are your thoughts? Crime 2024. NYPD did a good job. Is crime down? What is it looking for? Or is it more of the same?
Rank and file did a great job. The rank and file went out and did the job that they were presented with. They had a crime problem when it came to illegal firearms. They're all over the street. They made a substantial amount of illegal firearm arrests, which it goes hand to hand with the amount of guns that are out there. They're trying to fight crime to the best of their ability with this legislation. But when it comes to leadership, epic fail. We can't believe anything. I mean, how can we? And I think you made the point earlier, John. I think you're absolutely right. How can we trust anything that comes out of this administration? We have a potential racketeering scheme going on, a sex scandal, an overtime scandal, a potential abuse of promotions. We have most of the upper echelon has been compromised with internal affairs. We have the upper echelon has been compromised by hanging out at Concert Fritos, places with nefarious characters. But when it comes to them giving out crime numbers, this we should trust. Why is this any different? So I don't trust it at all. And I think Sam Mantar slammed it. He provided the information. He provided the evidence. And the fact is, it's just an outright lie.
Yeah, 100%. And I it's just the whole thing. So these guys were lying about everything, but we're going to trust them about the crime numbers. My friend told me 3 years ago, he said, I'm telling you, he said, I had a dream the other night that they all got purple walked out of One Police Plaza, and he was talking about Eric Adams, Ed Caban, Kaz Daughtry, Jeff Madry. I think we're getting real close to seeing some perp walks coming out of the NYPD. I think you're going to see a couple of people get arrested. I think we're getting real close to that time frame. What do you like? And then if that's the case, right? If that's the case that these people are arrested, and I believe that will be the case. I mean, at that point, you have to sit there and say, like, could we really believe anything that has came out of this administration the last 3 years? Right? And I'm going to say no, because Eric, like, let's face it, if you were a detective and you handled a ton of cases and we found out that you lied on one of these cases and you were doing some dirty stuff behind the scenes, it's going to overturn all of your cases going forward. Your integrity is tarnished. Any testimony you had is tarnished. It's got to be the same thing here. I mean, this is going to be a real stain on the NYPD history for a long time. This is the biggest corruption scandal in NYPD history. And that is without a doubt. So what do you think about that? Like, I think that if we start seeing, and what we've already seen, I think warrants an audit on nearly the entire department. It's too huge, but for 2024, I think a lot of things need to be audited, particularly the crime numbers. What do you think if we start to see top tier executives be arrested in the NYPD? Should that automatically spark numerous audits?
Well, there's no doubt about it. To me, I mean, I think it's coming, right? This has been kind of slow moving. I think a lot of people forget about Ed Caban, about this potential racketeering scheme, all those different aspects. That's why I say the sex scandal, it's created a lot of drama. It's got a lot of publicity to it because it is sexy. People like to talk about these things. It's just a reality. It's a lot of drama to it. But on the scale of anything, the scale of everything, the totality of circumstances, I think it's just a spoke on the wheel when it comes to the potential corruption that's going on. And I think the sex scandal is going to be nothing compared to everything else we hear, potentially when it comes out to private contracts. There has to be a substantial audit. And again, that's why I think there needs to be an overhaul of the entire leadership, because at this point, everything is tainted. Everything is tainted. And that's very isolated. We talk about a detective in a squad, if he perjured himself and lied, and we have to go back to all of his cases, and they have to be reviewed. Everything in this police department is going to have to be reviewed. Any system that was put in place, any discipline that was signed off, any lawsuits they were involved in has to be relooked at. All these cases in internal affairs under Eric Adams has to be reinvestigated. And again, I don't trust internal affairs anymore at all. Even particularly when it comes to our case, we're now on the third investigator in our case. And John, let's be honest here. The corruption is still continuing. It hasn't stopped. John and I have made some substantial complaints that include potential criminality and corruption. And our internal affairs complaint was categorized as misconduct, not corruption. So that's a problem on its own. Nothing has changed. And to me, this is just musical chairs. They're trying to give the appearance that they're changing the police department. But this is a major overhaul. This is going to cost not millions, billions of dollars to actually correct. This is not something, well, we take out the people that are arrested and we just start over. This is going to take billions of dollars to correct all the cases that are going on, all the discipline cases, everything, all the arrests that are done in this administration. Everything is questionable. I think this is going to take years. And ultimately, I think the most important thing and huge problem is the promotion system. We're going to have to go back and investigate every promotion in this administration to see if there's any potential ties to any corruption in the path of that promotion. And that's a shame for the people that actually worked hard and they deserve their promotions, because there are people that do deserve their promotions, right? Unfortunately, we always talk about the negativity, but there are people that deserve their promotions, but they're going to be casualties and pay for the people that stemmed corruption throughout this entire department. Our bad shout out to you, brother, 499. Great friend to the podcast. Says, great show as always. EDM needs upgrading. EDAS is more appropriate. Eric Dave anti-Semite. Juju rides a subway into 1PP Juju Ops Desk. Shout out to you, brother. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to call him a white Jewish male anti-Semite.
Sick stuff. Yeah, man. So we called, what Eric was talking about. We called internal affairs yesterday to see like who's our case investigator now. And they gave us the case number, The previous investigator was just giving us log numbers, not the case number. So the case number he gave us started with M. So I think we both like spit out our coffee basically, because, you know, for those of you that don't know, there's 3 types of cases in Internal Affairs Bureau. There's an OG case, which means it's outside guidelines, which means it's not really misconduct. It's, you know, it's you're outside of the guidelines. An M case is misconduct, right? It's an administrative allegation, right? So they're looking at you administratively. Our case was clearly a C case, which is a corruption case. The reason that is we alleged criminal association by the upper echelon of the NYPD with a person who was threatening me. We alleged, I mean, we didn't even allege it. We showed the proof of that. The person that the upper echelon was associating was a known criminal. So that is criminal association, which Sal got fired for. That is automatically a C case. And we listed numerous people with photos. We give photo proof of them. We give numerous other things that they were criminally associating. The same thing that Sal Greco did. And this person's now threatening me because we have a podcast that's critical of this administration. So we gave irrefutable proof of that. So that automatically makes that a C case. Then we also alleged that somebody, and we gave irrefutable proof of it, that somebody in this department was threatening the lives of our children. That is a crime. That is aggravated harassment. That is actually a felony because it was being done by way of the internet. It's actually a federal crime when you look into it. So that's the second part that makes that a corruption case. And again, it's still today, the case is a misdemeanor. The other thing that we allege is that there is a complete misuse of police resources, including overtime. I'm going to say that again, a complete misuse of police resources, including misusing overtime to attack, slander, defame both myself, Eric, and the podcast. And it was using numerous employees in the NYPD, particularly a captain and his entire unit named. So we gave irrefutable proof that this was happening while they were at work on overtime, that they were threatening us, defaming us, telling lies about us, telling things that you could only get from a department computer about us. And again, that makes that a C case, not because of what they did, because what they did is misconduct. But the person, why they did it, and the people that were ordering them to do it is official misconduct, and it is a crime. And the people that were putting them up to do that was Ed Caban, John Shell, and Kaz Daughtry. And it was official misconduct on their part, and Tani Kinsella. It was official misconduct on their part. It was official misconduct on the part of the Chief of Internal Affairs Bureau to move our case and not investigate it properly. Crimes, C case, yet it is an M case. So we'll be dealing with Group 1 going forward. When we speak to our investigator, we want to get them up to speed because obviously, you know, there was a shuffling of the deck to make it look like Jessica Tisch was the second coming of Teddy Roosevelt, when really she's the second coming of Tom Donlin, you know. And we figured out who Tom Donlin is. Tom Donlin is Stax from Goodfellas. They grabbed Stax. They made him the commanding officer of, they put him in charge of the NYPD for a few months before they whacked him. So, congrats, Tom Don.
I just want to address this real quick. Deuces 300 has a good question. Eric, do you think you would have been promoted if you were black with the same amount of CCRBs? So I think that not necessarily would I have been promoted just for being black, but I would have, if I had the right ties to nepotism, if I was Kaz Daughtry or Tariq Shepard, or I was Ingrid Sanders, or one of these people that were black that were tied to nepotism, I would have a much better chance of getting promoted. Absolutely. I do think I was discriminated against when it comes to CCRB. I do think that I was targeted by CCRB differently than if there was a lieutenant that was male black. And you can see it. And there was a time where the LBA, Lieutenants Benevolent Association, was starting to track the CCRB cases to determine based on gender and based on race if they were actually getting more CCRBs. And they started to track it. I don't know what happened with that data, but I think they balked on that data because the data started to show that white males like myself were significantly targeted more by CCRB than black counterparts. There's no doubt about it. The numbers started to show. I don't know where that data is. I don't know if the LBA actually kept the information, but they start to compile that information. But I do think I would have a better chance of nepotism with this administration. Again, but I was also not afforded due process. Technically, with these civilian complaints, I was substantiated by the Civilian Complaint Review Board, but I was never found guilty from the police commissioner because I was never afforded an opportunity to take all these cases to an administrative trial. As I was told, it would take 2 to 3 more years. And these cases were already 4 and 5 years old as they extended and used the COVID extension to target me with the civilian complaints. So, I was hitting, I was combating different fronts and different angles when it came to these CCRBs. Do I think I would have had a better chance? Absolutely. So there's numerous factors to this. I think nepotism would have been a major factor.
All right. So Stephen S. says, the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their most essential command, brought to you by Orwell, Tisch, and Adams. 100%. Nailed it, brother. So Sal Greco put this out yesterday. Allegedly, numerous pictures of naked women may have been stored at the residences of disgraced former NYPD Chief of Department Jeffrey Madry and taken in the raid. In some of the pictures, allegedly, were some of the members of the NYPD committing acts of debauchery. The plot thickens. So that is what's being alleged. I won't be shocked if that's the truth. Are you going to be shocked, Eric, if a couple of these guys wind up in those photos with debauchery?
No, there's no doubt about it. Again, this entire administration can't be trusted. I think that all these guys have worked together. I think they're all in cahoots. This is complete nepotism. This is a complete circle. Caban, Tariq Shepard, John Shell, Kaz Daughtry, Madry. These guys are all in on this whole thing together. There's no doubt about it. Madry created these monsters. Tariq Shepard, he created Kaz Daughtry. John Shell claims that Madry's his mentor. And also Caban. So this is complete. Madry holds the keys to a lot of information. So it's just a matter of time. If they have that much weight on Madry, and I do believe that this is going into a criminal investigation, I think that Madry is facing potential criminal charges. He's the one that could really open the can of worms on this whole thing. And these four men need to worry. Kaz Daughtry, John Shell, Caban, and Tariq Shepard, because Madry created these monsters. Madry could take these monsters down too.
Yeah, what do we got here? We got our bad. $9.99 to the podcast. I just wanted to give Marlon B a pat on the back. His statistical analysis on the Sal Greco show, absolutely magnificent. The illegal terminations of all of you gave you time to investigate them. 100%. Check out the Sal Greco show. He did 2 episodes with Marlon Bethel. I think the 2 analysis by Marlon was great. He's been deep diving into the overtime scandal. So let's get on to the overtime scandal now that we're here, because I think this needs to be highlighted. What's going on here? Let me get this off the screen for a second. So Corey Pegues put out a video yesterday. I'm not going to put the whole video on here. It's like 10, 12 minutes long. He puts out a clip though where he's alleging that the overtime scandal has a racial component to it. Now, again, we told you yesterday, this guy pops up out of nowhere. The mayor goes on his show out of nowhere. No one watches him. No one listens to him. The only people that watched and listened were because we shared it for him to get some eyes on it. And he bashes Shell on there. And it's so weird to me that happened. It was so weird. I personally believe he is complete misdirection. He is part of this propaganda, perception versus reality. And sure as shit, he went from bashing Madry and Shell and the mayor to having the mayor on to now, this whole investigation's racist. Again, I'm laughing. I'm laughing the whole way. I'm saying this is ridiculous. So we're going to get into what he's saying, what his argument is. I'm going to show you actually some stuff from Marlon Bethel. I wanted to bring him on, but I don't know if he's up. I just texted him. to actually talk about this, because he just went back and forth with Corey about this, because I don't know what the assertion is that he's trying to make here, and he's not even accurate in the numbers that he lists. Marlon actually has the accurate numbers, so I'll just play a small clip right here for you guys, and then let's talk about that.
Welcome to Corey's Corner. Big news coming out of the NYPD sex for overtime scandal. I just got my hands on the top 12 overtime earners for last year, and I think I might have discovered that there is a racial component attached and also a gender component. Out of the top 12 overtime earners, there was only one female, and we know who that was. That was the top earner. That was Lieutenant Epps, and she's Black. To see the full video of what I discovered, go to my YouTube channel at Corey's Corner 9098 and make sure you subscribe. Corey Pegues, always keep it right, not real. Peace.
So what do you think about just the assertion right there? He goes in on that, well, the three people that are being highlighted are all Black women. So is it because of race that this scandal is coming on? And basically making the assertion that the media is beating these people up because of the color of their skin. Marjorie and the three females.
Corey Pegues loves to paint the racial undertone. Every time he talks about something controversial, he talks about an unarmed Black man. An unarmed Black man when we talk about controversial shootings involved with the NYPD and New York City. He creates a racial undertone to everything. It's actually ironic what he's saying. You could actually manipulate what he's saying here. He's saying that it was a female Black that's discriminated against. She's the only high overtime earner on this particular list. Well, that's absolutely ridiculous, because we're talking about three females that are involved in a potential sex scandal that have been promoted and received an abusive amount of overtime, excessive overtime, under Chief Marjorie, who's Black himself, and they had a personal and intimate relationship. So where's the discrimination there? They've had a personal relationship. So according to what he's saying, if what he's saying is right, that there is a racial undertone, then there's actually discriminatory methods towards white females. Why weren't white females given the opportunity to get an excessive amount of abusive overtime to be part of the sex scandal? And now it sounds kind of funny saying that, but it's actually what he's saying, if there is a racial tone to it. So I think he's a paid plant by Eric Adams. There's no doubt about it. When I first saw the interview with Corey Pegues and Eric Adams, I said to myself, this seems to be a campaign for Eric Adams, and seems a great opportunity for him to deflect from what's going on and now actually paint some racial undertone. So, I mean, clearly we haven't seen Corey Pegues for a long time, and he just interjected himself at this position. To me, he's a paid plant.
100%. Chris Arnold says it here. The mayor on Pegues' show was the bait. Now comes the hook. Exactly. So I my personal belief, he's running misdirection. You know, a lot of people are commenting, oh, he's trying to stay relevant. I don't think so at all, man. I don't think that's what it is at all. I don't think he's trying to stay relevant at all. I don't think he's trying to interject himself in this conversation. I don't think he's trying to interject himself in talking about New York City crime or any other aspect. He's been so focused on this corruption scandal, and then boom, he just switches it. Oh, it's racist. I'm not buying it. Like, I'm not buying it. I said it originally. I think he's full of shit. I think that the mayor put him up to all this. I think he's working behind the scenes with Eric Adams. That's what it appears to be to me. I could be wrong, but I mean, we've witnessed Eric Adams for a while now. He does not go on any shows that are unfriendly to him. There is no way he did not have that conversation, what they were going to talk about, what questions were going to be asked prior to Corey. Like, thinking about it in hindsight now and watching that Corey's interview with the mayor, do you believe that Eric Adams didn't know what topics were going to come up? Because I don't. I believe he knew every topic that was going to come up.
No, we spoke about it. There's no doubt in my mind that it was pretty much rehearsed. I think that these questions were planned. They were pointed questions for a specific reason. And I think those questions were, Marjorie has already been exposed. He's already part of this corruption scandal. He's out of the police department. So let's put all that blame when it comes to sex scandal on Marjorie. And then I believe that John Schell, those questions would make John Schell the fall guy. And ultimately, to save who? Who does he love? What does he say in that interview? If anybody saw the interview, Mayor Eric Adams says, Kaz Daughtry, I love Kaz Daughtry. And there was one specific point in question that I caught. I said, this is about saving Kaz Daughtry. This is about burying John Shell and Madry. Because Madry's already out of the picture. He can't be saved. But what does he say, Corey? He says, why didn't you bring Kaz Daughtry to City Hall? He says, I love Kaz. I need him where he is. He's innovative when it comes to the drones. And he made the parallel and the comparison of Kaz Daughtry to Jack Maple. So that's really what it was about, to save Kaz Daughtry. Because Kaz Daughtry, during this scandal, this corruption scandal, he may need to find another home at another agency so he gets a full retirement. That's what this is about. And it was a campaign for Eric Adams. It was complete propaganda. I'm not stepping down and I'm going to run.
I couldn't agree with you more. So Marlon goes at Corey and he goes through his thing. So Corey puts up this thing and he blacks out the names, even though this is all public information. So I don't know why the names are blacked out. He said his sources gave it to him. We put this out, I think, 3 weeks ago. So I don't know what the hell he's talking about. And it's all public information. And again, it's not totally accurate, right? It's not totally accurate. Marlon actually gives the real numbers. So he puts that flyer out and he puts and he shows them like what see-through New York is and how to do it. So Marlon says to Corey, leave the investigation to the detectives, bro. You're trying to reframe this overtime scandal into a racial argument using cherry-picked data selectively parsed to fit your narrative. Your source, right? Because the source thing is ridiculous because this is publicly info. I shared it, you shared it, Sal shared it, Marlon shared it. We put this out weeks ago. We spoke about this, I think, over 2 weeks ago. Your source is simply sorted, publicly available New York City payroll overtime information of NYPD employee total earnings from see-through-new-york.net. Filter it to show only lieutenants with SA pay. Cropped it to hide the filter bars, and then redacted the names. It's all publicly viewable information, bro. Total money earned obviously is based on rate of pay, which varies by rank, time, SA pay, etc., rather than total OT hours incurred. The issue is massive overtime hours earned fraudulently by 1PP cronies. Picture 1 was displayed by Corey on his podcast. It's mobile smartphone view of the site. So I think that's a highly important point that Marlon points out. He takes data, he manipulates the data, he crops it out, and he puts it out like this is some revelation here, and it's not even the proper accurate data. It's only lieutenants with SA pays, and he shows you how he cropped it and what he did to crop it. Is somebody that's reporting on facts going to give you an overview, or at least they're going to tell you what the data is? Like, this data shows the overtime hour earns, or this just shows the total top earners as it relates to money. Corey didn't do that. And he blacks out the names for what reason? I don't know. But yet he's making the case that racism is somehow involved.
Well, this goes back to what I'm saying. So if he's just going to go by lieutenant special assignment, of course, the overwhelming majority is going to be males. This is a highly dominant male profession. There's going to be more male counterparts if lieutenant special assignment. And lieutenant special assignment, we know, is always a high overtime earner. But what we see now, we're talking about the egregious amount of overtime hours that were made in administrative positions at One Police Plaza. And again, I'm going to go back to that point that I was saying, that if we're talking about discrimination, why are we not talking about any female whites involved in the scandal? We're only talking about black females. It was black females that were afforded the opportunity to get this abusive amount of overtime, and also an abusive amount of promotions by rocket fuel. Ingrid Sanders was promoted 3 times in 2 years. She's a black female. I didn't see any white females promoted 3 times in 2 years. If Corey has that information, I'd love to see it. Are there white males that were promoted 3 times in 2 years? I haven't seen that yet either. So if we're talking about discrimination, the discrimination is actually against white females and white males. So it doesn't make any sense. And again, this is public information. For him to say he has the inside source, honestly, he sounds like a clown. He's a lot smarter than that. That's why I think that he's a paid plant to put himself in this position. Yes, it's not even about him being relevant. It makes him relevant incidentally, but this really is about an Eric Adams campaign and propaganda.
Yeah, so let's bring Marlon and Bethel up. We got him in the background. Marlon, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Hey, morning, fellas. How we doing today?
Yeah, no, we're just talking about Corey Pagis. I just pulled up. I don't know if you saw it in the background. You jumped in kind of in the middle of it, but I pulled in your initial response to Corey Pagis, showing how he manipulated the data and was only using lieutenants with SA pay and not looking at the total overtime hours. Like, what are your thoughts about Corey Pagis? What are your thoughts about the mayor going on Corey Pagis' show? What are your thoughts about now him spinning this narrative? Like, what overview of Corey Pagis coming out of the woodworks?
Yeah. I tend to give everyone a chance to prove themselves, And I thought Corey was actually the first interview he did with WBLS. I thought Corey was I thought maybe this guy had gotten fed up with what was going on with the NYPD as well. But after yesterday's video, I really have my doubts about what he's trying to do. That picture that he posted, first of all, was, like I said in my tweet, it's manipulated. He manipulated the filters on the see-through NYC NY State payroll data, which is, again, like I said in my tweet, it's all publicly available information that anyone could go on there and see for themselves right now. So he manipulated the filters to fit his narrative, and he even states on a video that he got this information from some secret source. Make it look like it's a legit, and then you can see on the picture itself, they try to black out the names, which again you can view for yourself. So I think Corey, I think right now he's trying to shift the conversation away from the topic at hand, which is about the cronyism and which is about the shenanigans going on at 1PP, into a conversation about race, which is clearly not what's going on here. I mean, we should be focused on all the fraud that's going on at 1PP and all the shenanigans that Marjorie's been doing. And I just think he's out there to misdirect us. I don't know what happened in between his first WBLS interview and his interview with Adams after, but I think maybe he scared Adams, and then maybe Adams went to him went to him to help boost his podcast. But something seems to have happened there, because Corey's clearly he's clearly trying to run cover for them right now. So,
Marlon, what's up, brother?
Hey, what's up, Eric?
Listen, Booster Malaka one says, good detective work, Marlon. A couple of people here giving you shout outs. It is great work. You did great. You took a page out of Sam Antar's book. You utilized his own information to show that, hey, you're trying to say there's some secret source. This is public information. This is more gaslighting. Where did he learn this from? Where did he learn the manipulation statistics? From Comstat, from the NYPD. This is where he learned it. And he's also part of the Eric Adams crew. Eric Adams is his buddy. I don't think this is to boost his podcast at all, because if you look at the views, the only views he's getting right now is because we're talking about it, and that's why he's getting any traction. Honestly, to me, he's a paid plant. Immediately when I saw that interview, I said, these are pointed questions that are very specific to get a specific response. I think it was completely rehearsed. I thought it was a campaign to actually promote Eric Adams. And I think that Eric Adams is a master deflector. And by using Corey and interjecting a racial tone, people will shy away from talking about this subject anymore. And I think that's ultimately the goal, right? We're not shy. We're not afraid to talk about this, because we know that there's no racial undertone to this. This is about an abusive, excessive amount of overtime, and this is just one aspect of the numerous forms of corruption that's going on with this administration. And that's what's going on. This is just another opportunity for Eric Adams to have complete deflection from what's going on. So when you start to interject this racial undertone, people shy away and they don't want to talk about it anymore, and they'll walk away, and it will become a subject that just becomes moot.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the same pattern with Adams. Whenever he can't argue with you, he always goes to his go-to is to call you a racist. You know, you're racist for asking him 12 questions that he can't answer. So now, what do we see here? They're trying to shift the argument towards that. But as I've said before, the data that I put up there is all publicly available info as well. This is payroll data from New York City itself, which is it's open payroll data, which anyone can take, and you can import into Excel, and you'll see the information for yourselves. Okay, the data doesn't lie; it's right there. And as I responded to Corey earlier this morning, the data speaks for itself. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. So Marlon, that's a good point. The WBLS interview that Corey does, he comes out blasting, right? He blasts Eric Adams. He blasts Jeff Madry. He blasts the entirety of New York City, basically, the Eric Adams administration. And then immediately after that, Eric Adams goes on his podcast. There was 100, in my opinion, there was 100% something that was worked out behind the scenes. In hindsight, looking back at the Eric Adams interview on Corey Piggy's, on Corey Corner, do you believe that Eric Adams, in your opinion, do you think Eric Adams was given those questions ahead of time? Do you think that was a staged interview? Because I do. I'm looking at it now from a different lens, and I'm looking at it and I'm saying this was all done on purpose. All of this was spoken about prior to that interview. And there was a reason, in my opinion, and I said it yesterday on here, that John Schell's name was being smeared, and Eric Adams allowed him to smear John Schell's name. And I believed it was being done to try to racialize this conversation. And boom, not even an hour after we do that podcast, that's exactly what happens. It's racialized. And that was being done to smear John Schell's name. In your opinion, just whatever you think, do you think that interview was staged? I do.
Absolutely. I think the interview is part of a ongoing campaign by Corey to simultaneously throw Chief Schell underneath the bus and change and deflect the argument to being more of racism in the department or whatever, and away from what's at hand here, which is cronyism, which is the overtime fraud. And this, like I said, it's funny that this happens after Corey has that initial interview on WBLS, where Corey says a lot of things that we didn't know prior to that interview. And I think maybe it scared Adams, and maybe they figured, you know what, let's go to Corey and see if we can boost his podcast, and Corey will play along, which he seems to be doing right now. But I agree. I think that interview was staged, and like what upset me about it was that there was no follow up by Corey. I think if you had, I agree that like me and Sal talked, and I agree that if you ask, if you go too far, Adams is just going to end the conversation. But there has to be some sort of follow up to a lot of these questions, because I felt like there was still there's so much unanswered that even though Adams has these politician answers that he gave, that if Corey had asked him one or two more questions, we could have moved the ball a little bit, But yeah, I agree.
I thought the same thing.
Part of an option.
I think John and myself, Marlon, you're 100% right. We actually gave credit to Corey initially, saying, these were pointed questions, they were good questions, but he didn't give follow-up questions, right? Yeah. After watching it and talking it over several times, we realized the follow-up questions weren't there because this was completely rehearsed to get a specific response. I know the follow-up questions I would have asked. What follow-up questions would you have asked?
Well, I would have asked him about Madry, and he's known Madry for a very long time. He's known about the allegations that have circled Madry, and yet, even after all these allegations, he keeps giving Madry another chance. I would have asked him, would he have given Madry another chance had these allegations not have gone public? because again, like I said, Corey himself said it was an open secret that Marjorie was involved with his driver, and the videos I posted on Twitter before, like I posted a video of Wendy Garcia, who's the commissioner of OEO, and Mark Stewart, who's commissioner of community affairs, and they both gave a warm embrace to her as she was getting promoted, and that didn't seem to me an embrace of it seemed to be an embrace of a friend, and someone who they knew. So they all knew what was going on, and they all knew she was getting outrageous amounts of overtime, and she was getting promotions every year. So it's an open secret, and had it not been publicized, would he have continued promoting Jeffrey Marjorie? I mean, Marjorie was literally like steps away from being the next police commissioner, if you think about it. So, I mean, this is a question. Yeah, Adam said himself that he likes giving people multiple chances, right? So, how many times are we going to give a guy who's had so much sexual allegations and so much misconduct allegations against him? At a certain point, it stains the department, and it makes us look unprofessional, and it ruins the national reputation of this department.
So I agree. I mean, I 100%. I don't think you're backing Eric Adams into a corner, but like with the whole suspension thing, I get, it wasn't your decision. Okay, well, if it was, would you have suspended him? What would you have suspended him or not? There was some stuff that he could have. I wouldn't even say pushed, but just elaborated further with Eric Adams on at least at what his stance was. Maybe even if Eric Adams doesn't even respond to it, at least he gives him the opportunity by telling him how he feels about it. So I agree with that. So up on the stage right now, this is a spreadsheet that Marlon put together. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marlon, but this is the top overtime earners in the NYPD. Could you just explain to everybody what we're looking at up at this spreadsheet?
Okay, so what we're looking at right now on the top is the total overtime earners for 2024. We're looking at both civilians and uniformed personnel. Yeah, as you can see, the actual top earners were civilians in our communications division, they were basically 911 dispatchers, right? Further down, you'll find a Lieutenant Epps, and you scroll down, and those are the other cops, other uniform members who incurred a lot of overtime. Now, as I mentioned on Sal's show, the vast majority of guys traditionally on this list are guys who, going back to prior to 2023, were guys who were out there in foot posts for long hours, guys who basically lived in the precincts, guys who, they haven't seen their family for days because they're on overtime, right? Post 2023, we start seeing a lot of people in 1PP who are in administrative roles. And this is something you didn't see prior to 2023. In fact, one year, I believe it's 2021, and then almost the entire Brooklyn North public safety, or the renamed anti-crime unit, shows up there. And you look at those guys' records, and they were collaring left and right. And these were gun hunters, people who worked for their overtime. But again, like you're seeing now, we're seeing people out there in administrative roles. So below that, we have the total uniform OT hours for 2024 for uniformed personnel only. So this is that above list, but when you filter it to remove the civilian personnel. So at the top is an officer who was in K9, and now his overtime is kind of, they do something weird there where they include the dogs, but that's an officer who was at the precinct for days and who worked for his overtime. Okay, but right below him we see where the Lieutenant Epps is. Now, what Corey said this morning was a complete word salad to me, and I'm like, I couldn't, I didn't have my coffee yet, so I wasn't going to parse Corey's words and try and figure out what exactly he was talking about. But the point is that by me putting up that is to show him that, listen, the data speaks for itself, and the issue is the fraudulent overtime, and the lieutenant did incur it. And you can see it in the data that I posted, and you can find it by viewing the city's open payroll data yourself. I don't know what happened here.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I think that's an important point, because I think we're what Marlon gave you is completely different from what Corey gave everybody, right?
Yes.
Corey gave everyone this little broken down, highly edited document that skewed things to fit his narrative. Like the police department does with crime numbers. They give you the crime numbers that they should be looking at in order to fight it, not to see what's trending, and they try to give it to you in a way, oh, this is what's trending. It's like, no. If we want to see the trend, we want to see it over a few year period. So Marlon's giving you that outward view, like Sam Antar's giving you that outward view. And this outward view absolutely debunks everything that Corey's saying. Now, if we're going to use any argument for as if this is a racialized, I do believe that Marjorie and the three females are getting the brunt of the attention around this overtime scandal. But I think, like Eric Dim always says, it's because it's sexy. And it just happens to be that sex sells. And like, that is just another component to the corruption. The overtime, there are workers in here that are all now muddied, that have their names are going to be muddied as if they weren't working those overtimes, as if they weren't spending time away from their family out on the streets of New York, or investigating crimes, or arresting perpetrators. And sorry to all you guys that your names are out here, but it is what it is. It's out here, so we got to have the conversation now. Not our fault that the upper echelon of the NYPD is systemically corrupt. That does not mean that everybody on this list is corrupt in any way whatsoever. This is just the overview of what it is. When we're going to look at the overview of numbers, of overtime numbers, we see how do we look at overtime numbers? You're going to look at the hours. Who earned the most hours? That is the person who's the highest earner. Now, Epps, Lieutenant LSA, she's at the highest rate of anybody that could earn overtime. Her overtime hours like $160 an hour, compared to a communication tech that overtime hours might be $60 an hour. I don't know exactly what those numbers are, but that's why when you look at who earned the most amount of money, it will be different from who worked the most amount of hours. Racial, in terms of racial. Now, the only argument that I could see that could be made that's racial is that Marjorie is black. The three females, 2 are black and 1 is Hispanic. So I think the only argument you could have here is that Marjorie doesn't like white women. I think that's the only racist argument you can make here. I don't see how you can make the argument that they're being highlighted. These people are being highlighted based upon the color of their skin. I think that's a ridiculous argument. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, that's exactly what I said earlier. I said the same thing, and we both agree that the only racial undertone that could be painted from this overtime abusive scandal here is that Marjorie actually discriminated against white females from getting the opportunity to be part of this circle and this club to get this overtime, whether it's through nepotism or through sex. And as I always say, talking about sex, it's a sexy story. That's why this got so much publicity. But I think, and based on the data that you got, Marlon, would you agree? I think this is just a spoke on the wheel of the aspects of corruption that's going on. And it's just a small snippet into the insight of what's going on here. It's not just women that are involved in sex. It happens to be particularly when it comes to Marjorie's office. But there are numerous other people that have abused and got excessive amount of overtime. For instance, Sean Shell's driver. He's a lieutenant also. An extreme amount of overtime hours and very questionable. Yes, there are people on this list that work very hard, that did not go home to their families and earn the money. But unfortunately, it's being overshadowed right now by an excessive and abusive amount of overtime that was abused by the upper echelon tied to nepotism.
Yes.
And that's why I say what we've heard from the unions is just completely useless and hogwash and a waste of time. And it's sad that people are stuck with these unions that are not fighting with them, that don't care about them, but take their money, because the response to the unions was not, we have a problem with the upper echelon. They're abusing overtime, costing the city millions, costing the city billions. It's the rank and file that pays for it. But instead, they blame it on the shortage of what's going on. So, Marlon, based on the data that you got, is there anything that you found with this data? Is there anything else that you could highlight, something that we may not have realized or noticed before when we talk about the data, right? We spoke about hours. We talk about the money. Is there anything else that you've noticed about this data that you'd like to bring to light?
Well, just that, well, if I may, Corey, like I said, Corey selectively parsed the information on the website called NY State See-Through, right? He selectively filtered the data to show only lieutenants and lieutenants with special assignment pay. Now, after doing that, Corey starts talking about Lieutenant Brennan. Lieutenant Brennan now shows up as, if you parse the data, if you filter the data for lieutenants only, Lieutenant Brennan shows up number 2. Now, I'm not excusing his overtime at all, but the facts are the facts. He shows up as number 2 in total money earned, but when you look at how much overtime earned, and that's where the issue is. The issue is fraudulently obtained overtime. When you look at that, he shows up as number 68, whereas Lieutenant Epps shows up as, pull it up here, she shows up as number 2 in the entire department. Yeah. So the facts are the facts. But as for other information on that, yeah, as I've noted in a couple other posts on Twitter, that again, there's a sergeant in Brooklyn North that, again, how is it that you have one person who shows up 100 plus names above a similarly positioned sergeant in the other boroughs? And again, is it a coincidence that sergeant also used to work with Marjorie? And is it a coincidence that this sergeant had a disciplinary charge that was, it seems like there's a lot of shenanigans going on with that, because if you look at the charge itself, on the department lists the charge on the quotations, and they use the insurance term rather than the legal language in their charge. And if you look at other officers on who that same year received that charge, their allegations were explicitly spelled out that she was the only one who they used an insurance term, and whoever put it into the system used quotation marks, right? So that person shows up as number 3 in the entire department. So, you put when so much coincidence, like I said on South Show, when so much coincidences start popping up, it's like spider sense tingles. There's something going on here, and will the department actually investigate this? I have my doubts, because again, now we're going back to other chiefs who that person works for. And is it a coincidence that other chief is also involved in another scandal with Jeffrey Marjorie too? So, but we also see anomalies in the fact that so many people in communications has so much overtime, when prior to, in 2023, only 2 people from communication showed up there. Now we're seeing 5 people in the top 10 are from communications. They're civilians from communications. So either communications has like a competency problem, where they're forcing the people who are most competent to do massive amounts of overtime, or those people that they're getting special treatment that allowing them to like break the bank. Yeah, but it's an anomaly in the data. And again, if anybody has any doubts about this data, you can go on the city's own website, which is the citywide payroll data, and take the data for yourself and import it into Excel, and you'll see it for yourself. So it's all there.
No, we appreciate it, dude. Yeah, I think that's it. I think we completely debunked I think we completely debunked what Corey's saying, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it comes down to, based on your data, Marlon, really for an investigation, just some simple questions. And it's who authorizes overtime? What codes were utilized for this overtime? And ultimately, I think this is what this comes down to. It's not a dollar amount. It's how many hours were actually performed of overtime? What was the amount of hours performed actually possible? Was this work, whether it was administrative or the street? I don't think is really the most important part. It is, of course, it is ridiculous, of course. But when we talk about a potential corruption, were these hours actually performed? Was this person actually at work? So these are questions. But I think ultimately what this comes down to is everything we've been saying, John and myself and Marlon, you've been saying it also, and of course Sal Greco, for the past 2 years, that this all comes down to nepotism. And I've always used the line, nepotism equates to corruption. And it equates to corruption not just in a sex scandal, but nepotism equates to all the corruption that's going on, because the nepotism is the breeding ground to allow the pathway for different forms and different aspects of overtime. When it comes to questionable promotions, when it comes to the hours of overtime performed, and when it comes to sex, and when it comes to the people that you hang around with and where you hang around it, and criminal association, it all comes down to nepotism. And I think that's really the driving force. So, John, when we talk about an overhaul and, cleaning out the department, really what we have to clean out is this egregious amount of nepotism. This nepotism, to me, is the number one factor when it comes to overall corruption. Somebody asked me before, would I be promoted if I was black? And really, it doesn't come down to black and white. It comes down to nepotism, because Marlon, you're black and you were discarded by this administration. It comes down to overall nepotism. I think John and I identified it early on. When we did our first episode, we identified Kaz as being a promotion based on nepotism to rocket fuel. We said it wasn't because he was black. It's because of the circle of nepotism. So the theme of this administration and this upper echelon of the NYPD is nepotism. And this nepotism is so deep that it equates to corruption. We're not talking about the kind of nepotism where, I came on this job and John came on this job and Marlon, you came on the job, I think also not from a deity. You didn't have fellow cops in the family. You made your bones. People got to know you. Hey, Marlon's a good investigator, right? They knew John. John's a good leader. They knew me. You know what? Eric's a good leader. He loves working with the guys in the street. And we got to know people on the job, and they knew our work. So when it came time, I went to PSA 7 as the special operations lieutenant. The commanding officer wanted me to come there, but it wasn't because he liked me. It was because he knew that I was the guy to get guns. So he knew me. So that's not a form of nepotism. But what we see what's going on right now, the nepotism is because it's a circle of friends, and they're not put in positions because they're intelligent, they're the most suitable. It's because this is the party department. And that's really what this is. The party department is the nepotism department, which created the Department of Corruption. So, Marlon, dude, I have to thank you so much. You're doing such a great job with the data. And it just shows that the NYPD slept on John McCary, Eric Dim, Marlon Bethel, and Sal Greco. We were ambitious while we were on the job. What did they expect when we were off the job? So, Marlon, shout out to you for doing great detective work. I appreciate it. You're the man, brother. Thank you.
Marlon, before we start to wrap up, dude, we just saw the crime numbers for 2024. NYPD's reporting it's down nearly 3%. They're reporting great numbers of first week in 2025, saying it's down. Crimes down week to date, nearly 19%. Even though we had 46 shootings, and shootings are up over 368% for the first week of 25. What are your thoughts on crime for 2024? Do you believe that crime was actually down in 2024 in New York City?
No way. Especially with the shortage of cops that we have, there's no way. This department is again, it goes back to why they're doing perception management. It's because they have no actual plan to actual effective plan to lower crime. So when you don't have a plan, you have to go back to gaslighting and changing the perception, telling us that the sky is red when it's actually blue, and they're hoping that if they tell it to us enough times that we're going to actually believe it, and maybe that the low information voters are going to believe it when it comes to November and going to go re-elect Adams. But there's no way. I'm talking to guys in like transit, and they're telling me just how bad it is, how short they are, and even the overtime, the guys that are being sent down there in overtime, it's just not enough. It's putting like a band-aid on a gaping wound, and it's what you're seeing is just an extension of that perception management with these numbers.
Marlon, I think you're doing a great job with this perception management. No doubt about it. We talk about perception versus reality. I don't think you have to sell people to feel safe. You either are safe or you're not. That's the bottom line. We can't say this is the safest big city in America and then say, well, people don't feel safe. That just doesn't make sense. It's completely contradictory of itself. I have a perspicacious mindset to understand what's going on with policing and understand that politicians like to gaslight the public for their own personal gain. And that's what they're doing. And Jessica Tisch is no different. She's a politician in this game, and she's trying to change our perception of what's going on in the city because she's a patsy for Eric Adams. There's no doubt in my mind. Is she that white horse? No. So I just want to leave you with that. Before we get out of here, Marlon, we're now with the 4th police commissioner. You're no longer with the police department. What was your perception of the appointment of Jessica Tisch? And do you believe that she is that white horse, or do you believe when we say that she's a patsy for Eric Adams?
No, 100% she's a patsy for Adams. 100%. I believe she was brought in to basically behind the scenes change infrastructure and a lot of the technology, and to use that technology to hide the fact that we have a manpower shortage, and the manpower shortage is resulting in what you're seeing with actual crime. And again, I think she's brought in to integrate AI and all these new technologies to obfuscate the fact that we have low manpower. And what you're seeing here with her just parroting the similar things that the department has said before about crime being down, parroting that gaslighting to us, is that she's just following the script, and it's something that I think is going to happen even more so as we head into 2025, because again, you can't put a band-aid on a gaping wound. We have to get back to the meat and potatoes of policing, and you can't just, we have a problem right now. You can't just throw an AI and think it's going to fix the problem. It's not going to work. If you really wanted to do something like that, you first have to clean up the streets. You have to get crime down, right? And then you use computers and technology and AI. But first, you need boots on the ground. And until that happens, you're going to see the gaslighting continue. And as you're seeing with that sponsored ad on Instagram, I expect we're going to see even more creative, more creative perception management. So it's going to be an interesting year in 2025, but expect more of 2024, but 10x of that.
Oh, I agree. I think this month hasn't even warmed up yet. All the crazy stuff we've seen. Last thing before we run, what do you think about congestion pricing?
Oh yeah, I knew it was coming. The city is part of the C40 City Initiative, which is like some global UN World Economic Forum program, where they said this was coming years ago. Basically, and if you think congestion pricing is bad now, that's coming. They're going to spread that out, like you said, to other parts of the city. And I wouldn't even be surprised if they put it on the Belt Parkway next, or highways that lead from Long Island, like the LIE. So as soon as you cross into New York City, you're going to be charged maybe $3. They'll start out low right now, but you know how it goes. They get in low, and then 10 years from now, you're paying maybe $20 or whatever to get into New York City. But don't for a second think they won't do that, because you see, the city has a budget problem, fiscal deficits, and the MTA is over $1 billion in debt. So they need to make money. They need to fill these gaps, and they have no plan to improve the quality of life such that you bring back people who've left the city, you bring back businesses that have moved to Florida, to Texas, to Tennessee, to Arizona. They have no plan for that. So what their plan is to continue taxing the residents who are still here, and you're seeing that in congestion pricing. So expect more of it throughout the city, and don't even be surprised if Hochul doesn't get this idea too and start throwing up cameras in other parts, in other highways throughout the state.
There's no doubt about it that the MTA, in my opinion, based on all the data, is the most corrupt run organization in the entire state, and mismanaged when it comes to. I mean, the MTA gets so many funding from different angles, including the Verrazano Bridge. I mean, they just get money from so many different angles, and it's always mismanaged, and there's always shortage. They never have enough money, and the question is why. And you look at the data, I mean, it's just completely mismanaged. The budgeting with MTA is an epic failure, and there's another site of corruption right there, MTA. And on the state level, I think it's a complete disaster. It's just a complete disaster. And there's no doubt in my mind that this congestion pricing is just the beginning. And that $9, don't sit comfortable with that $9 forever. That's going to go up also. And I do believe that there is going to be congestion pricing injected in other parts of the city. There's no doubt about it. This is almost like the first experimental, see how this goes. And I think that, I would expect definitely somewhere like, Brooklyn, maybe like Williamsburg area, where there's a lot of trucks coming in, over the Brooklyn Bridge there. So maybe somewhere in Queens, but definitely it's coming sometime soon. There's no doubt about it. I think that New York City, honestly, is becoming a prison. I don't even know who wants to live there anymore. John and I were talking about the other day, unless you're in some financial, if you're working on Wall Street or, some finance guru, why would you want to live there? It's becoming a prison. You can't go anywhere without a camera. You're going to drive 20 miles per hour. Congestion price is going to hit you. It's a prison. I mean, your wallet is going to go beep, beep, beep everywhere you go. Snake Plissken, shout out to you. Coffee and donuts. That's right, brother. $4.99. Congestion pricing. What a scam. Major scam. Absolutely. I'm in California right now, and people talk about it. Oh, it's so expensive, crazy politics. Yeah, and there's a huge aspect of it. But I think New York is far worse, honestly. You could drive in California and all these freeways. Gas is expensive, but you could drive a long time without a toll. And it's a lot more breathing room than is in New York City.
Yeah, it's wild, dude. It's totally wild. I was literally just there, and I was so happy to get back to Florida. And I was like, but in all fairness, I always hated New York in the winter. Like I lived there for 40 something years. I was like, I'm not meant to live in this climate. I don't know how, like why my ancestors landed here. Like, why are we here? So I never loved New York, but I love New York. I'm there all summer. I love the fall in New York. The spring I could do it out too. The winter and the spring, they're rough seasons. But yeah, I literally was saying to Eric, I was like, the only reason to live there now is to work and make money. Like there is no quality of living. It's just not. I'm telling you, dude. I was like, I couldn't believe. Every time I'm there often. I'm there usually quarterly, and I'm like, I can't believe how bad it's gotten, and the state of everybody that's in there. And then, and I'm like, well, I never realized it because I was just working all the time, right? And that's what it is. Like, you don't really realize how you're living or how you adapt to life. But yeah, you're taxed for absolutely everything. You can't drive anywhere without being on camera. Ding, 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 ding. Speed cameras everywhere. Red light cameras everywhere. You're constantly being taxed and told. And the quality of the way you have to live has greatly diminished in the last 12 years. It's greatly diminished. It's like, it can't even be ignored. I'm like, I see, like, again, I could flash back 12 years ago to Staten Island. You'd be very hard pressed to find a homeless person. Maybe down on the ferry. You drive all over any point of Staten Island, there's homeless people everywhere. And they're not from New York City. It's not like they're people, you know, it's not like all of the workers that New York City Mayor Eric Adams made homeless. Like most of those people left the state because they couldn't work and they were like, well, I can't live on the streets of New York City. I'll die. I'm going to go down to Miami or I'm going to go wherever. So it's not them. But it's crazy, man. It's crazy. It's crazy to watch. And the amount of businesses that have went out, I think 60 restaurants went under on Staten Island in 24. Like, you know, and I'm not talking about like restaurants that like, oh, they popped up. I know the restaurant industry is hard. I'm talking about like staples in Staten Island. I'm talking about like Denoy and on the South Shore. That was like a go-to restaurant. Everybody had parties there. I'm talking about like big name staple restaurants gone, 60 of them. Places that I've went to. And that has a lot to do with the amount of people that are fleeing the borough and the state and the city. It has a lot to do with it. It has everything to do with it. I mean, again, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm in Florida and I have about 60 families of tax-paying New York City residents that have young families that lived on Staten Island or in Brooklyn and went out in their community and went to these restaurants and these small businesses and they spent their money in New York. They lived in New York. They worked in New York. Their kids went to school in New York City and they're gone. And I'm like, and it's really like, it really brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. I'm like, this is something that could have been, not only could have been avoided, I believe this was done intentionally. I believe it was done intentionally. I do. And, I don't know why I feel like that. I just do. It's horrible.
Yeah, it's 100% because again, the World Economic Forum, they all talked about this. They have white papers on this. They have videos on all this. And basically, they want to turn Manhattan to compete with one of these rich international cities like Dubai. And if you like Dubai right now, you need like a high income to even live there right now. And you go on the street and the streets are clean and everything and all perfect, but yeah, you're gonna need a couple $1 million to live there. And they have some wacky ideas to turn Manhattan into that, instead of making it a place that every one of us could afford to live there, But yeah, it's gonna get bigger, and people, what's funny? I try and tell this to a lot of cops to try and like get them to go to the unions, and maybe if they all went to the unions would actually understand that they need to speak up to help save the city. They can't just be worried about their own little fiefdom, But a lot of people up here just do not understand economics, They do not understand that if your tax base flees your city, you're gonna have problems. You're gonna have pension problems, and nobody's thinking about that. Everybody's just concerned about their little fiefdom. Like the unions keep asking for more money, but you can't get more money if more money isn't coming into the city. If the ecosystem of the city, the business ecosystem, isn't flourishing and money isn't flowing, then the city can't pay you more money. So you have a vested interest in improving the quality of life and in helping to save the city rather than just protecting your own little kingdom. But they don't understand this. Yeah. And
that's why I think congestion pricing is all part of this plan with global elitists, right? Which I know exactly what you're talking about, right? Dubai is that kind of city, global elitist. That's what they want from Manhattan. So if you push all these people into the subway because they can't afford congestion pricing, then you just have rich people with fancy cars driving around Manhattan. They can park where they want. And it's pretty much, it's almost like you're separating the classes, right? The higher class is going to be on the streets and the lower class is going to be stuck in the subways. But this is definitely a global elitist program, no doubt about it, when you look at the economics of New York City. But yeah, listen, we're 2.5 hours into this. Marlon, thank you so much for getting up and coming on with us. Your data has been awesome. Stay on point. Keep your finger on the pulse with that data. Nothing better than to have an argument based on evidence, right? And that's the part that I have a problem. And that's why I was giving credit to Corey initially with his interview with Eric Adams, that he wasn't having an argument and letting him speak. But when you try to have an argument, if you are, test someone's logic by providing evidence. And that's what you did. You tested Corey's logic because Corey's trying to paint the racial undertone. Okay, no problem. Then if you're going to paste that racial undertone, then you need to have the evidence to back it up and test his logic behind it. And his logic behind it is to just point fingers to who's black just to deflect proper information. But ultimately, I think we debunked it and showed that reality, if you want to talk about discrimination, it was discrimination towards female whites. And it sounds kind of funny because we're not asking for female whites to have a sexual scandal and to be victims of potential sexual scandal themselves. But that's ultimately what he's saying here. So we completely debunked it and can deflect it. I think this is enough airtime for him. I think he's got enough airtime for this period. So Marlon, shout out to you, brother. I appreciate it. Check out Marlon at Fire Detective. He's all over X. Marlon deserves to be reinstated, vindicated, and compensated. And I wish you the best of luck, brother, and I hope you get back to it. And you are family. You're the finest unfiltered family. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have Jim Walden on Thursday. He's going to come on the live. He wants to come on the live. So, guys, bring your questions for Jim. Keep them realistic and professional. We're not going to tolerate any nonsense, so we won't even read it out. So anybody that has questions for New York City mayoral candidate for 2025, Jim Walden, bring them. Looking forward to that interview. We'll be back tomorrow, live 8:05. We have a hard out, I believe, at 10. So we won't be going on too long. And yeah, I personally, I like I said, I still love the Corey Pegues interview with Eric Adams. But I think Corey's corner is ultimately Eric Adams' corner. I think he's in the Eric Adams corner, and I think he's running misdirection. And I think, I think we labeled it out right before he came out swinging yesterday with all this nonsense. I think we hit the nail on the head with it. I'm not backing off it for a second. I respect everybody. I respect everybody's opinion. I respect everybody's voice. But I'm going to call it what it is. I see someone running a misdirection campaign. I don't see someone out here trying to make themselves relevant. I see the mayor trying to make him relevant so that he's able to run misdirection. That's what I'm seeing. Marlon, you want to close us out today? Thank you for joining us short notice.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, guys. It's always great to be on here and, have a nice discussion. Everyone who's watching, you have a safe day, and guys who are on patrol, be safe. And don't get complacent out there. It's the beginning of a new year. It's not the time to relax. Okay. All right. Have a good day, everyone. And
all right, babe. That's it, people. New York's finest retired unfiltered podcast. We'll be back at you tomorrow.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.